good, Jackie? All right, welcome everybody to our General City Council meeting tonight. I believe Mayor Watts is on the phone with us, yes?
I am, thank you.
We'll first have, oh my gosh, I told Jackie I would mess this up. There it is. We'll have a Pledge of Allegiance. Jason Van Osdale is going to lead us.
Please repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jason. City Council comments and recognitions. Do you have any?
I do. I have a couple. Make sure I'm doing this in the right spot. So just first recognition. One, had the opportunity to attend the Herriman Arts Council. Now I'm going to, Steve, you were there with me. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
The Murder and Mayhem.
Murder and Mayhem, thank you. And just wanted to give a shout out to, again, the Herriman Arts Council, those talented folks that put that together. Had a great time with my wife and friends that night. A lot of fun. I can see that that's growing year over year. The demand is getting higher and higher. And just really wanted to commend them on their efforts, the culture that they bring to our community. And please, Wendy, if you would make sure that that gets back to them, I appreciate that very much. Secondarily, I just want to make a comment that's on the public record. Early this evening in our work meeting, I had my integrity called into question as we were talking about one of our items in there. And this is the second time in a public format that I've had my integrity called into question. And both times that happened, first time was via social media, second time again was in our public work meeting tonight. Both of those times they were called into question. It was by Councilman Henderson. We had the opportunity to talk after the first time that my integrity was called into question. And I didn't, I don't do social media, and the talk that we had at the time was that I'm okay if we have disagreements. I think that's very healthy for us on the council to have disagreements. I think in light of disagreements, or at least good conversation, we come to better resolutions of the issues that are before us. But I did express that I didn't feel like it was appropriate to use social media to call my integrity into question, and at that time indicated that I felt like we'd moved past that after we talked, but did indicate that I didn't think it was appropriate, and if there was occasion for that to come again, that I would defend myself. And so I am defending myself and my own integrity tonight to say there was an insinuation made that I am somebody that will only enforce or talk about the policies of the city that may be beneficial or that I believe in, and not all of them. And I am here to tell you that that is not true. That I have the highest level of integrity in myself and those around me. And I consider all of the policies of the city to be important. Again, I am fine with disagreement. I am fine to share our differing opinions, but I feel there is no way in a public forum that personal attack should come into that equation. There is an opportunity for those to be discussed outside of a public medium, and I prefer that that's where they be handled. And I'm not very disappointed, and quite honestly, quite hurt that I have to feel like I have to defend myself publicly tonight. But I did want to put that statement on the record and ask that as a body, that again, we be respectful of each other, those that have been elected by our constituents. And though we absolutely will have times that we don't agree, that we respectfully listen to those opinions And if it's something that we feel like goes beyond just discussion, we have those discussions offline where I think it's most appropriate. And so that's my comment that I wanted to put on the public record tonight. Thank you.
I don't mind making one in response, I guess. I will apologize publicly if I've offended you for any offense, and I apologize if I've acted out of turn. It was not my intention. We were speaking about one particular item in the work meeting that I called out that I couldn't understand your position, as it seemed to be opposite of what you had said previously. So I apologize, and if I did that in any wrong way, I completely apologize for that.
Thank you.
Moving on, item.
So I just wanted to take a moment to talk about just a recognition of the memorial service that was held for SPD Hondo. For those of you that were in attendance there, you knew that was a solemn and a sacred occasion. It was magnificent. I could not think of a more appropriate tribute and send-off. It was sobering as Councilman Orrin and I and my family had the privilege of riding with Councilmember Smith in his vehicle near the front of the motorcade. And as we were coming down 6400 West, turning by Butterfield Park, he said, Clint said, turn around and look. And as we looked over our shoulders, it was lights as far as you could see. It must have been a mile long of cars in tribute. And it was a beautiful thing. I was especially touched by the members of our community that came out, that lined the procession route, that came out with flags and signs. There was one in particular that was a young Cub Scout who saluted. Sorry, I got emotional, man. That was that was a heck of a thing. I wanted to thank all of those in the city who helped organize and put together such a wonderful event. I want to thank the community that we live in. I was never more proud of the city of Herriman than I was at that moment, and very proud to represent the city. I especially want to thank all of our public safety workers, our law enforcement officers especially. I'm sorry that you had to say goodbye, but I could not have been more pleased with the manner in which you did it. Thank you for such a magnificent tribute. Thank you for such a wonderful community event and allowing the community to be a part of that. That is something that will stick with me forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'm not going to say anything about that because I cry every time I do. Next item is public comment. However, maybe a couple of things, and Jackie, I apologize, I don't know how to do this in the right order, but apparently we are going to continue item 9.1 as there's additional language, I think, that we're changing on what's being considered for that ordinance. So if you're here to comment on that, you're certainly welcome to, but we will be continuing that item, and you're welcome to come out now or again
Not
later.
on 9.1. There was 2 ordinances presented for item 9.1, and the council has a choice to make a determination on what they would like to do. Justin will present both options. That's for the hunting exceptions, the hunting within city limits.
Yeah, I thought you were just gonna.
This was supposed to be presented in the work meeting
That's correct.
prior.
Right.
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, what we've talked about, and I briefly talked to Councilwoman Orrin and a few others about this, and since we've received some public input over the last couple days that we want to take into consideration, and we were thinking that it'd be best to continue this so we could have those conversations. So I didn't have a
Okay,
chance to
I
catch you.
apologize, I wasn't given
Nope,
that.
you're good.
Okay,
information.
Doing my best with not knowing exactly how to do this and last minute, so is that,
So, yeah, I think.
so we are going to continue 9.1.
Yeah, and so Justin will present on that tonight.
So if you are here to make comments on that, please feel welcome to. They will be part of the record and be considered for next time as well. And then I didn't know if it had been suggested that potentially with all the items pertaining to Mountain Ridge, do we want to have public comment for those now or at that time?
Said that we would do that after the presentation so that the public had the opportunity to see the presentation and then they'd have the opportunity to comment after the presentation.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with that, yeah.
Do you need anything official, Jackie? Okay, so same thing for if you're here to comment on Mountain Ridge, please wait to comment until that presentation. We'll have public comment at that time, and someone will have to remind me because it's not on the paper that I'm reading, giving me the instructions. Having said that, if you're here to comment on anything else, I've got three forms here. Gavin Burrows.
Good evening, Mayor. Sorry you couldn't be here tonight, and other council members. My name is Gavin Burrows, and I've lived in Herriman for 20 years, all my life. And I'm going to be talking about fifth generation wireless technology that's being launched all over the world currently. If you're unfamiliar with 5G, it is the beginning of the Internet of Things, which is planned to turn our world into something straight out of a science fiction film. Where everything in our lives is interconnected using wireless technology. Myself and many others are, of course, concerned about the upcoming 5G because there are a number of health concerns related to the millimeter wave technology that fifth generation wireless will be using. Let's see, I don't know if Herriman has plans to implement it, if we already have sections where fifth generation technology is already in use, but there is a vast opposition worldwide to this technology. Let's see. There is health, safety, and privacy concerns that are, for the most part, being largely dismissed by the media as utter nonsense, but there is a growing body of evidence to show that there is serious concern here. I will be providing a 6-page document cited with sources and a USB flash drive for each of the council members to further investigate what I'm discussing. The media is saying that 5G is using non-ionizing radiation, so there's nothing to worry about, but the reality is blatantly untrue. The NTP, the National Toxicology Program, did a $30 million study over 10 years, proving that on rats, there was a direct link to a heart tumor using energy and frequencies that were much lower than we are exposed to nowadays. Showing DNA strand breaks similar to what an opera singer would have an effect on, like a glass. If you hit a certain frequency, that glass would break. It's similar to with wireless radiation where if it hits a certain frequency and the body resonates with it, the DNA strand will break, which in turn creates the tumor and potential cancer growths. The FCC and the FDA don't take account for this because they only measure the thermal effects. Can I continue, or is it really limited?
Time's about up. How much you got left?
Just a little bit more.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to read off the Herriman City mission statement, which is, city is dedicated to provide courteous and efficient service to the public, preserve community identity, and promote a quality of life. A high quality of life. The vision statement is Herriman City will continue to be a place to establish roots, create opportunity, embrace our heritage, protect diversity, and promote economic development. And while preserving the, quote, Herriman feel, provide a safe and inviting place to work, play, and live. And by implementing this 5G technology without any opposition, we would be completely going against what the Herriman City mission statement and vision statement is, because there is just, it's almost completely insane what the federal government and the telecommunications industry are pushing on local cities and local governments, honestly just stripping away the rights, the authority, and the decision-making among the council members. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. And my apologies, I didn't read this prior to the first public comment, audience members may bring any item to the city council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on any items that don't appear on the agenda. Normally, I would point you towards our city planner or even our engineer, but I don't see any either.
Jonathan.
Jonathan. So if I'm sure he can fill you in on kind of what's going on with some of that. There is, I think I'll make just one comment. There was a state law passed last year that forces us to do something. So Jonathan can fill you in on our efforts there so far.
Should I discuss with you after it's over? Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next form I have.
Chief, did you get that data that he wanted us to? Okay.
Scott Lockwood. Mountain Ridge. Okay. The other form I have is for Mountain Ridge also. Do we have comments for anything else tonight? All right. So then we'll move on. City Council Board and Committee reports.
So I had my first mosquito abatement meeting. That's going to be cool, by the way. That is fascinating, the amount of information and resources that are dedicated to mosquito abatement in our area. It was very educational. I don't really have a lot to bring out of that because it was more of a training and orientation meeting and a review of some internal policies and procedures. But there is one note that I wanted to share with the public. They are surplusing a truck. It is a 2009 Ford Ranger with 28,000 miles on it. So it's pretty low miles. And they're looking to sell that for somewhere between $6,000 and $7,000. So if there's anybody looking for a really good, affordable used truck, I just wanted to pass that along. So, and then I also had Association of Municipal Councils meeting just this week. There's some questions that were raised among the various municipal councils regarding coordination and plans regarding any potential COVID-19 related items. I don't want to alarm anybody or create any panic, but as a matter of prudence, we have plans in place to continue operations, to support essential services. We're going to be reviewing those later tonight from our city manager, but all of the municipalities are talking about it and trying to figure out ways to make sure they're identifying telemuting, all different kinds of options that might exist for employees. One other thing that came up in that meeting, there was a presentation made by a PhD from the Environmental Dispute Resolution Center at the University of Utah. Specifically enough, we didn't actually talk about environmental issues. We talked about dispute resolution and conflict. It was really interesting. They were talking about how communication helps resolve conflict. That we need to understand that conflict just is. There are people with differing ideas and different opinions, different agendas, different intents, different positions, different interests. But that conflict can either be destructive or constructive. That sometimes through conflict we can generate new ideas and accomplish new ways of doing things. So I'll get that information. I'd like to pass that along. I'll try and see if I can share some of it online. But it was a fascinating exercise in learning about some of the elements that go into the communication that's required to overcome conflict and how important that is. So that was about it, but it was great meetings, both.
I had my first water board meeting, not waterboarding, but water board meeting today. Sometimes if you type it on Siri, she says waterboarding, and that's not what it is. And I'm going to defer, and I will give a report of that in 2 weeks, just because I came directly from that meeting, late to this meeting, so I could be to both meetings, and I'd like to give a more comprehensive report based on my notes. So if that's okay, I'll report on that in 2 weeks so I can make sense.
It's good. Anything, Clint?
Nope.
I don't have any either. I'll delay that one. We'll move on to item 7, presentation of the Jess Miller Award. Wendy.
City Council, thank you for allowing time for this recognition this evening. It's much deserved. This is Catherine Nelson from our building department. She's our building official, and she's been with the city for almost 16 years. It'll be 16 years in July. But she has over 24 years of service in building safety, and so we're really lucky to have her for a number of reasons. Not only is she very well versed in the profession, she's also very professional. She's very prepared, and a lot of our staff look up to her. She has a lot of great experience. And I invited Jason here, and Jackie filled him in that he was going to be the one that did the presentation. And so it was a surprise for him. But Catherine just recently was awarded the Justin Miller Award, which is a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Utah chapter, I don't want to get this wrong, of the International Code Council. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Jason. He's going to tell you a little bit about the award and why it's so important to their profession. And then we'll do some pictures. So I'll turn the time over to Jason.
Thank you, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and recognize Catherine and her accomplishments. Jess Miller was hired by Uinta Basin, Utah, or Uinta County as an inspector back in 1972. And in 1978, due to complications of diabetes, had to have both his legs amputated. But that didn't deter him from being able to continue forward with his work as an inspector. He learned how to shuffle around, still do his job. And later, within just a few years after that, he continued to have serious complications and would invite contractors to the hospital, his hospital side, to actually have plans examined and answer questions to still do that service, and did that with a wonderful personality and was a mentor and a great example to a lot of the industry back then. And unfortunately, in 1984, Jess Miller had passed away. And in his memory, the Utah chapter of International Code Council came up with the Jess Miller Award. And we look at this award as a once-in-a-lifetime achievement. We look at the entire state for people that show an example of passion and desire to move our industry forward. And Catherine has been a wonderful example of that. In the Utah chapter alone, she has been one of our founders in the permit technician division or committee that has been very successful in providing training to our frontline counter help with the permitting process. And she was one of our founders of that. And it is still running good today and is very functional. In fact, in 2 weeks, they have a big training that she was fundamental in helping get started. So I was the one that made the decision to who that award went to, as I'm the immediate past president of the Utah chapter. And it wasn't a very hard decision for me to make. Catherine and I have been working together in various capacities through the state of Utah with her government affairs initiative that she goes and gets involved with the legislation, and how she teaches and was willing to teach others, in starting from the front counter to becoming in a position just like hers as far as management in the building official capacity. So we gave her this award, which is the Jess Miller Award, 2 weeks ago down in St. George at our main conference. So hats off to her, because she is one in at least 1,500 people that are all candidates for that award. So Herriman City has someone that is truly unbelievable in her capacities that she does.
Well, I'm not going to say much other than I just am really humbled and honored with this award. Thank you.
Well deserved, Catherine.
Hold a picture of David.
Catherine? All right, 1, 2, 3. All right.
Those Herriman City employees racking up the awards lately.
Say, we're getting quite the trophy cabinet, I think. All right, we have Herriman Police Department Annual Report, Chief Carr.
Thank you, Council, for having us here. This is another first that we've got going on, and this is going to be your first annual report. You get to see tonight, but it's a bonus report because it's 15 months instead of just 12. So we'll give you the last quarter four of 2018 along with 2019. Now, I've been accused of talking too much. So, in response to that, and to my accusers, I have invited my command staff to come and give you kind of a unique perspective on their individual divisions, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. They'll be introducing some employees and some of their units and giving you some insight to those areas. And I would invite you to ask questions of their disciplines so that you have a better understanding of that. I probably would be remiss not to mention Karen. So as Councilman Smith probably knows, we're going to and some of you other might know as well, we're going to a countywide CAD system, computer-aided dispatch, right? It's been quite a struggle. We've gone from Spillman to Versaterm and Herriman, so we are on Versaterm, which is the system that the county will use from here on forward. And in doing that, Karen had to touch about 17,000 records to compile the statistics for tonight. So she had to go through this. So I would be remiss, Karen at home, thank you for all that you did. Let me introduce to you, first off, Chief Reyes, if you would. Sorry, it's not working, Jonathan. A little, thank you. Still not working. This is gonna be a long night. Yeah. That would be it. On-off switch, okay. Chief Reyes is over Administration Division, Records. He deals with the Administrative Assistance, Fleet, Citizens Board Advisory, Chaplain, Internal Affairs, and Animal Services. And he will go through a lot of those tonight and also introduce you to some of those folks. If you will, sir. Here, let me give you the on button.
Is it on? Okay. Thanks for having me. Like Chief Carr just mentioned, the Administration Division is comprised of 7 components and is the home division for 7 employees and 8 volunteers. So residing within this division, as you can see up on the board, are Records, Animal Services, and mine are out of order from the PowerPoint, but Records, Animal Services, the Administrative Services, Internal Affairs, Fleet, our Citizens Advisory Board, which is all volunteer, and then our Chaplain Services, which is also all volunteer. I wanted to take a minute tonight to highlight just 2 of the units within my division. And the first one that I'll be highlighting is our records unit. And so I'll ask our records coordinator, Patsy Hall, to join me up here. Patsy came to us, as many of our employees did, from other police departments and animal services divisions from throughout the county and actually Utah County. And Patsy came to us from Sandy. She's been in records for close to 30 years. And we were, I can't overstate how lucky we were to steal her away from Sandy and get her to come over here. Just so you have an understanding of what our records department does, they are responsible under Patsy's stewardship for managing, maintaining, and disseminating all police department created records. So any record that the police department creates, Patsy is in charge of. Those include reports, witness statements, audio and video recordings, photographs, etc. And the storage and the dissemination of these files and documents are governed by stringent state and federal laws and regulations, as I'm sure you can imagine. And our processes that we put in place are frequently subject to audits and reviews. In addition to managing our own records, this department, again under Patsy's stewardship, is responsible and liable for preserving our department's access to partnering agencies' data and records, such as the Utah Driver's License Division or federal criminal history reports and those sorts of things. And those are also obviously governed by state and federal laws. The function of the records department is absolutely critical, as you can imagine, to our police operations. And as a new police agency, our records department was successful in quickly implementing protocols and processes that were congruent with state and federal guidelines. And just recently, we were the subject of 2 audits, one from the State Bureau of Criminal Identification, and then also one from the FBI for our National Incident-Based Reporting System, which is critical again for our survival. And after 2 of those audits, Patsy and her unit received accolades from both agencies, one from the FBI for having 0 reporting errors, and we were certified and compliant with NIBRS almost immediately. We were one of the faster agencies to get certified as a brand new agency. And then the most recent audit was from BCI, as I mentioned, and Patsy received accolades from them as well, most specifically for having 0 errors in entering objects or property or people into NCIC, which is a national system. And BCI auditor remarked that it was an unbelievable feat. He couldn't believe that that was accomplished from a small, brand new agency, and he had to go back and check his own numbers to make sure that he wasn't wrong. So thank you, Patsy. Job well done. You can sit back down unless they have any questions for you. The second unit that I'm going to highlight tonight is our Animal Services unit, so I'll ask Debbie Pedersen to join me up here. As you all know, I'm sure, Herriman began self-providing animal services in July of 2019 after terminating our contract with Salt Lake County. Somehow, and still unbelievable to me, we were able to start our own animal services unit in 30 days. Oh, sorry. All right. I forgot I was in charge of that. At least I didn't forget to turn it on. So, again, unbelievable to me, we were able to start this unit up in 30 days. And not only did we start in 30 days, but we immediately began providing a superior service as well. This tremendous feat was only accomplished because we were able to hire the right people right away. Our animal services team is comprised of highly experienced, dedicated, and driven individuals who are able to make something spectacular from scratch. The unit is led by Debbie Pedersen, as I mentioned, who came to us from South Salt Lake. Again, a good steal for us. Thankful that she was able to take the leap of faith and leave a job that she had been in for close to 20 years with South Salt Lake and come over here and pick up our animal services unit and do such a spectacular job. In addition to leading our animal services unit, Debbie is also an executive board member for the Utah Animal Control Officers Association. And when she came over here, we kind of set down our goal when this began. And that goal was to provide a service that was consistent with Herriman's existing culture of family, compassion, and customer service. And Debbie and her unit was able to do just that. Some of the areas our animal services unit has focused on are proactive patrols, compliance through education, and returning animals to their families as quickly as possible. And they've been able to make all that happen splendidly. Now, rather than having our citizens go out to a park and step in a pile of unpleasant substances or have a plethora of dogs running loose in parks, I'd suggest that you'd each be hard-pressed to find one off-leash, a dog off-leash in a park. Owners are picking up after their pets, and most importantly, we've had a dramatic increase in the number of speediness in the family reunifications for lost animals. They've also been successful in establishing key partnerships with charities and other organizations throughout not only Salt Lake County, but as far north as Weber County and Utah County, and this has all been because of Debbie and her crew's efforts. So you can see up here, the chief reminded me that we had slides that I could go off of. These are some of the statistics that we've gathered over the past few months that our animal services unit has been in service here, and you'll notice that we've responded to a large number of calls, and our call volume, although I wanted to provide comparative stats for you for our animal services unit versus Salt Lake County's, Salt Lake County's reporting system was a little bit off compared to ours, so it was difficult to give you a apples and apples sort of picture there. But I did want to just kind of show you some of the stats that we've been able to achieve over the last few months. So, any questions for Debbie or Patsy? I can drag her back up here by her ear if you guys have any. All right. So that's the administration division. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Reyes. I'd also like to embarrass Mary for a moment. Mary's in records. You guys have met her before. She's one of our new employees this year. Was also in passports before, right? And then we have Sarah Thrall and Charlotte Maker, and they're also in animal services, and they assist Debbie. Okay, on to operations division. This is Lieutenant Cody Stromberg. If I can have you come up, sir. Lieutenant Stromberg, excuse me, is over the operations division for our agency, and he is going to give you some fascinating statistics and some heat maps today that we can talk about a little bit more in depth, because Councilman Shields had some questions about that and how that correlated with areas. So we'll talk about those again. Would you like this? Okay.
Thanks, Chief. Apparently he talks long and I talk boring, so I got all the statistics. I promise I'll try to make it interesting. But so I supervise the operations division, which has 22 sworn members, including myself and a plethora of crossing guards that we'll talk about here in a little bit. Our goal as we went through this transition to the Herriman Police Department was to provide better service by increasing visibility and response. I think that we can safely say that we've accomplished that. In fact, we hear very frequently that we see you guys all the time now. And I want you to know that's not accidental. That's very deliberate and intentional, and is done by the way that we allocate our resources. The operations division is responsible for all aspects of uniform patrol, including responding to calls for service, proactive crime prevention, and initial response and investigation of crimes. The traffic unit is also part of the operations division. Includes traffic enforcement, the motor unit, and the crash team. There you go. We have 2 full-time traffic enforcement officers working in the division, and then our motor unit that works part-time, and they're all responsible for traffic calming and mitigation. The overwhelming majority of their work is actually driven by citizen complaint. We've highlighted that on our social media pages and in public forums frequently over the last 15 months. We have a complaint form on our website where residents can actually go in and submit traffic concerns directly to our traffic unit, and it creates workflow for them. During this reporting period, we've had over 100 individual traffic complaints that were submitted through that method. So as you can imagine, that keeps our 6 traffic people fairly busy. Our motor unit, in addition to traffic enforcement, is also responsible for specialty escorts, one of which was mentioned by Councilman Shields as we go through memorial and funeral services for sworn members of law enforcement and the military. We also do dignitary escorts. Our motor unit actually participated in the escort for the visit of Vice President Mike Pence to South Jordan last year. Those escorts are very dangerous and require a high degree of skill that not every motor officer possesses, so we're super proud of the work that they do there. Our crash investigators unit is something of a unique animal and something that we're very proud of. This is a shared resources unit that we share with our partners in South Jordan Police Department and also the Riverton Police Department. It allows us the ability to access greater resources while also making sure that we provide opportunities for experience and exposure for our investigators and our responders to be able to better manage these types of incidents. We have 6 members of our team that are assigned to this unit as a part-time assignment. We also partner with our city GIS department who flies drones actually for crash scenes. And they have participated on a number of call-outs with us, both in Herriman and in South Jordan and Riverton, to document these crash scenes from the air, which is somewhat of a new technology that we spoke a little bit about last year, but has really been groundbreaking for us and frankly is unparalleled in the state of Utah. The ability that we have to capture these scenes from the air, it helps us with distance measurements, it helps us with comprehensive review as we go through the investigation and potential prosecution of some of these major crashes. Our members respond to callouts in any of the 3 partner cities. That's done under a very clearly defined protocol intended to prevent overuse of the resource and manage the resource for the individual agencies. But again, like I said, also to provide our people with experience and to provide each individual agency with access to more resources should the need arise. Over this reporting period, we've responded to about a dozen call-outs of major crashes in the 3-city area. As we take a look at our total traffic accidents, or our traffic events, I guess. The DUI one is something I wanted to highlight, 94 DUI arrests over the reporting period. This is actually done under state and federal grant money. So we're actually able to recoup our costs for the enforcement of our officers, and they do a great job. And we're able to, we're actually one of the higher arrest rate agencies in the state, which is why the state likes to give us money. We put it to good use. You can see our traffic other category that includes things like parking problems, reckless drivers, and then our traffic accident data you see on the left there. That 3 fatalities actually is 4. And that was my fault. I neglected to include the latest one. We had a motorcycle fatality last year over in the Timbergate apartment complex. So, and then the other 3 was our triple fatal that happened literally an hour after we went live in September or October of 2018. So again, our crash investigators unit is able to thoroughly and competently investigate those types of incidents because of the team, the superior team that we put together and the skill set that they bring. As you look at the heat map here for traffic accidents, again, it identifies areas of higher crash propensity. It does naturally tend to follow areas where we have higher traffic volume, some of which are not surprising to us, a few of which are. You can see along the Mountain View corridor there, and then 5600 and 134 for some reason tends to continue to be an issue for us with traffic crashes. What this data does for us is help us identify areas where we can conduct proactive enforcement for those behaviors that contribute to crashes, like running red lights, failure to yield the right-of-way, distracted driving, that type of thing. It helps us concentrate our enforcement efforts on those specific areas. Okay, I want to talk about traffic tickets for a minute. This data actually does include written warnings and parking citations as well, so not all of these are citations that generate a fine revenue, and very clearly and slowly enunciate that not a single penny of fine money goes to HPD. None of it. Everybody get that? Okay. So we're not out writing tickets to generate revenue. In fact, the revenue that comes from citation fines actually goes to the court to operate the court, and even that is not enough to bring the court into the black. The court actually has to be subsidized by the city every year in order to operate.
Cody, I'd like to clarify, because I get asked all the time, if you guys have a quota for tickets. And to the best of my knowledge, we let you write as many as you want.
That's right. They let us write as many as we want. Yeah. No quotas. Quotas actually were legally banned by the state of Utah a couple years ago, but number one, they just don't make sense. Number two, doesn't fit with our vision and what we're trying to accomplish, which is to address the problems that need to be addressed in the way that they need to be addressed, and not to limit our people to a specific way of doing business. So again, we will take the data that we have and we conduct proactive enforcement off of that. We're certainly responsive to the resident complaints that are generated from the web form, and that's where our focus is on traffic enforcement. Because we could sit out on Mountain View corridor all day with 6 guys and we could write about 300 tickets a day, right? It's just not in fitting with our vision and where we're trying to go. So we address the traffic problems that we have, but we're not trying to make traffic the primary focus, right? And then just one quick point, as you see there's a spike there in the month of May. That's fairly typical. That's actually the kickoff for the 100 Deadliest Days, which is an initiative that's driven by the state of Utah, where we'll go out and we'll proactively enforce a lot of the behaviors that are related to traffic fatalities in anticipation of the busier summer months. And so that spike occurs typically in May and early June every year in response to that proactive enforcement for the 100 Deadliest Days initiative. We also comprise the K-9 unit in the operations division. One of the better, I would argue the best K-9 unit in the state. We certainly stole some amazing talent from other police departments when it comes to K-9. As has been mentioned several times, recently lost K-9 Hondo, and it's still hard to talk about, but at some point, we have to talk about what the future of that unit is. And we know that that will continue. We know that our considerable expertise in that particular area is not going to allow us to step backwards. And so we'll move forward, and at some point, we'll acquire another canine, and that dog will certainly have big paws to fill. But we have high expectations for that unit, and they are certainly up to the challenge. The child abduction response team is also a multi-agency task force that we participate in with the state of Utah. That's a task force that's run by the Attorney General's office. We have 4 members of Herriman PD, including myself, that are assigned to that team in a part-time capacity. The Utah CART team is built off of principles of designed response. So they're assigned to a specific area, be that investigations, logistics, search coordination, volunteers, to quickly and adequately respond in areas of child abduction. There's statistical evidence that points to time-distance relationships for child abduction, and so a lot of our response protocols are built off of a speedy and efficient response. And so that is a resource that is available to us at any time should that situation ever arise. There are approximately 45 to 50 members of that team statewide that are available to come out and supplement our resources if we ever have that type of an incident. And conversely, our members also are subject to response and call out anywhere in the state of Utah that resource is necessary. Everybody's favorite. Talking about crossing guards real quick. Just to put it in perspective, there are about 7,000 to 8,000 elementary kids that have to transit from their house to school every school day, and that's certainly an amazing feat. We have some awesome partners at the Jordan School District that help us work through some of these issues. Statutorily, crossing guards fall to the city, and so we hire, staff, maintain, and train approximately 60 crossing guards. That includes guards who are assigned to a particular crossing, as well as substitutes that will bounce around and pick up shifts where gaps need to be covered, because you can't have a crossing without a crossing guard. It's a bad thing. It's a small, seemingly small piece of our operation, but it actually has a very major impact on our community. So we want to make sure that we're providing the best service possible, and also recognizing that as we grow and add schools, that this issue becomes more significant for us. And so we're currently conducting a comprehensive review of all of our policies regarding crossing guards, the placement of crossing guards, to make sure that we're on a good and sustainable path for the future. As we know, we continue to grow, we'll continue to add crossings to that 58 crossings that we currently have in the city. There's a time delay on this, Jonathan, just so you know. That's why I have to keep skipping back. The Honor Guard is also a function that falls in the Operations Division. We have 7 sworn members that participate in the Honor Guard. They take care of all of our ceremonial functions. I'm sure you've seen them at multiple flag ceremonies, the Memorial Day ceremonies. They also participate in funeral honors for retired service members, as well as retired members of law enforcement and fire service. They train and drill every month. This is a resource that is not officially shared, but we certainly draw from our neighboring partners, and we reciprocate in providing staffing for events that come up in their areas as well. Talk a little bit about dispatch calls for service. Over this 15-month reporting period here, we're set at about 18,000 calls for service, which is a little over 14,000 per year if you slice out the fourth quarter of 2018, which transitions to about 1,100 calls per month. Tends to trend a little bit down in the winter months, as you can see, and trends up as the weather gets warmer and people are outside more. This is about reflects the, I don't have the numbers from 2017 that we presented, or that UPD presented before the transition happened. But we are seeing what we anticipated to see as far as an increase in calls for service, not significant, but enough to be noticed from our previous law enforcement provider. Just to finish with some breakdowns of those calls for service and statistics. You can see here what we call societal crimes. That includes public peace, public order, alcohol, tobacco issues, drug activity, burglar alarms, warrants, weapons offenses. The section on public peace includes things like harassment, loud parties, disorderly conduct. Public order includes ambulance calls, found or lost property, missing persons, 911 hangups, welfare checks, and juvenile problems. You'll see on the heat map here, and thanks Councilman Shields, you kind of stole my thunder. The one thing that made this interesting as far as statistics go, stole my thunder from the work meeting, but as you look at heat maps, keep in mind that the areas that tend to be highlighted tend to follow a trend of where our higher density housing is, and to make sure that people understand that it's not necessarily the higher density housing that creates a higher per capita crime rate. It's just having more people in a confined space. So when you put it on a heat map, all those little dots that you see on the heat map are an incident. So on this societal crimes map, every dot represents a societal crime. If you took the same number of units that sits in Timbergate and Copperwood and you spread them out over any neighborhood in the city, you would have relatively the same number of dots, just more dispersed. So higher density doesn't mean higher crime rate, it just means higher number of crimes in a more confined area because there's more people. And also make sure you understand that City Hall is not a hotbed of crime. That just happens to be where the rec center and the library is, which we know are sometimes, we have some higher propensity for some theft-related incidents there. And then also with the City Hall complex itself, if we have like a case of lost property where people don't know where it came from, but it was lost and they turned it into the office here, we'll use the police department address as the address for the case, because every case has to have an address in order to be compliant with BCI, so it makes Patsy happy. Every case has to have an address. So if we just don't know where it happened, but it happened in Herriman, we'll use the police department address. So some of those dots will fall on City Hall. We try to, as best we can, put those where they belong, but there is an inevitability that some of them fall to this building, so.
We're glad that's not a reflection.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of crime going where we have the most cops. No, that's bad. Property crimes. Again, theft, forgery, fraud, damaged property, trespassing, burglary. So the burglary would be burglary of a residence. That can include like an open garage door. Anything that's attached to the residence is considered a burglary of a residence, even if it's only a theft incident. And then the theft incidents themselves encompass not only property theft itself, but shoplifting as well as theft from a vehicle. Same type of pattern that you see in the property crimes heat map. Again, trending towards not necessarily higher crime rates in the higher density housing areas, but definitely higher occurrences. Persons crimes, you see assault, robbery, sex offenses. Domestic violence is the bulk of the persons related crime that we deal with, 45% out of our 1,100 incidents over this reporting period. That's pretty significant and has led us to create a pretty robust and very efficient domestic violence investigations protocol that includes our victim liaison and everything that she does, and she's awesome, and I'm not going to steal any of Lieutenant Weimer's thunder. He's going to talk about that a little bit, but domestic violence is certainly something that we deal with frequently out here. The note of having 0 homicides is also important to us, not only because homicide is a bad thing to have, but also because as you look at the statistics in the state of Utah, there's a significant proportion of homicides that occur in the state of Utah that are domestic violence related. So since we are dealing with domestic violence on a frequent basis, it speaks to our protocols and the fact that we have early intervention and some other tools that we're utilizing to prevent some of that escalating violence from occurring, and has resulted in 0 homicides over this reporting period. So. And then the other category would include things like extortion, suicide is listed there, and all death investigations. In fact, there's a state, any death that occurs outside of a hospital in the state of Utah has to have a police investigation attached to it, even if it's somebody on hospice care or somebody with a terminal illness. Whether the doctor signs a death certificate or not, we have to respond and open an investigation. So those are all captured there. And again, you see the heat map that's very reflective of the previous two. And really, there's not one area of the city where we see these issues arise more so than the others. Sorry to end with statistics, but that's all I got.
I also promised my staff that I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to. And that's talk for just 1 minute. And that's about and Lieutenant Weidmer, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but I will for just a minute. We have a fantastic relationship with Riverton and South Jordan. And you'll hear again about some partnerships that he's going to describe. And Mayor Staggs, thank you. We enjoy that relationship. It's healthy. And we knew that we could do a regional model that was really successful in cities that made sense, right? That have same socioeconomics and those kind of things. So thank you for partnering with us. Lieutenant Weidmer, if you would, please. Lieutenant Weidmer heads up our investigations division, and he's got a lot to tell you. You're going to press this button. It's going to take a while, but don't lose hope. Got it. It's going to be fine.
Thank you, Chief. Council members, it's great to be here with you tonight. Thank you for
We're
having
glad
me.
you get to give your thunder now. Because everyone was trying to steal it.
I feel very fortunate to work with great women and men in our investigative unit and in the various other areas of responsibility that I have. We do have our detectives that work property crimes and persons crimes, directed enforcement, and they also work in community-oriented policing. We have a sergeant and 4 detectives. We have our victim liaison as well, and we also have a forensic tech who gives great service to us and brings great expertise. In addition to those detectives, well, let me say, just to give you an idea, in Herriman City, we bring in to our investigative unit about 350 cases a month that they'll look at and screen and determine which ones are viable in terms of criminal investigation, and then they assign those out to detectives that spend a great deal of their time working on those cases. I also have the pleasure to work with our SWAT team. In the South Valley, Riverton, Herriman, and South Jordan, we have just over 30 operators that give us really the ability to professionally handle any incidents that we have and to bring those to safe resolutions. So and the expertise that we have within that unit, we have many operators that have many years of experience and that bring skills in explosive entry and marksmanship and in a lot of other areas. We also were fortunate to bring a team leader from down south to come up, who is one of our team leaders here in Herriman. I mentioned our evidence technician, Lance Bess, who oversees our property and evidence also, and you can see there we bring in quite a bit, and one of our challenges is storing and handling that evidence and that property properly and disposing of it in the right way. I'd like to ask Christy Morgan to come up, and I'll let her speak for just a minute on our victim services.
Hi, thank you, council members. It's always an honor to speak to you and let you know what we're doing. It's interesting to see statistics because we always want to get a big picture of what our program does and who it serves and the people that are getting resources and the referrals that they need. But then it's always great to kind of go small picture so you can see what that means to maybe an individual. So research has shown that when an advocate is involved, victims of crime are more likely to have a police report taken, and they're also more likely to remain engaged throughout the criminal investigation process and through the criminal justice process. Back in December, I started receiving some anonymous emails from an individual who was concerned about some domestic violence related issues going on. And one thing that's very important to people who are experiencing domestic violence is to have some degree of control, because that's often taken away from them. And so they like to know what their options are. They like to know what they're able to do before they're maybe forced into a decision. So as I was talking over email with this person, about 2 months later, she had decided, based on the information that we had discussed, that she was going to make a police report. So she brought in her information. Ended up taking her about 3 days from the time that she said she was going to make the police report till she was able to come in and do that. And through that process, we were able to get her engaged and connected with our investigations division. and resulted in criminal charges against the individual that was perpetrating the violence against her. There were a couple times where she really wanted to sort of disengage from the process because at best, being a victim of a crime is extremely inconvenient, and at worst, it's traumatic and life-changing. And we were able to facilitate resources and services for her that were able to keep her engaged in this process, provide the information that she needed, provide the legal representation that she needed, so that this is something that can go on to prosecution and can hopefully end what she's experiencing. So that's what those numbers represent, is that type of process, that long-term engagement, that service and referrals that they need in order to get the service that they need. Anyway, thank you for your time. It is my great honor and privilege to extend the care and concern that Herriman City and its police department has for victims of crime.
Thank you, Christy. Council, I want to tell you that you saw the statistics that these domestic violence cases are a big concern for us and take quite a bit of our time and resources. And having Christy as part of our team is so essential to our success. I've said this before in front of you, but to be able to liaison with victims of crime and then also work with detectives well takes skill, and she does that very well. Another part of Christy's responsibility, her position is grant funded, and managing that grant and being able to show the fiscal accountability is a big challenge. We received a letter from the state, the auditor, that comes to look at our VOCA grant, and Lindsay Stock, who's audit manager, and then also Wendy Winder, who works closely as an auditor and a VOCA consultant with Christy, sent us a letter, and she said, I just wanted to send you a quick reply letting you know how much I appreciate your work. In addition to the great work you do with victims, your documentation and your ledger are excellent. It's rare for me to see information this organized and accurate. So on all fronts, Christy does a fantastic job for us. We really appreciate her. Christy. There are quite a few other areas that we work with in our investigations. We've got, you can see in the photo there, we have a search and rescue group of about 12, some volunteers and some police officers. And this first year we got together equipment, and we're working on building expertise. And we also spent time patrolling the trails in numerous functions, some of which had to do with hunting in Herriman, as you well know. I'm also over the training unit. They do a fantastic job keeping our officers certified and skilled and up to date in all the critical areas. One of the areas that we're working with in training is how we interact with those who are in mental health crisis. It's been one of our focuses of the training unit. We have a training coming up in April that will address specifically that. The Armory, Bike Patrol. We also have started a crisis response unit which focuses on mental health of the officers and also mental health of those in the community. So some of those in our community who are in need, who tend to require more resources if we don't handle them correctly. And so this unit responds and helps to interface those individuals with proper mental health resources in the community. Our negotiators who work with the SWAT team are also in that unit. And then we also are starting our foray into emergency management. You know, if you've been to a DARE graduation, that our DARE officers do a fantastic job. We've twice in the last year had DARE officers intervene where a life was saved in the school. Having them there it just has a great impact. As you interact with the school administrators, I'm sure that they'll tell you that. And then DARE, if you've been again to a DARE graduation, you see the auditorium full of people. It's a fantastic program and we appreciate your support with that. I want to talk for just a minute about Pure Court. About 2 years ago, well, let me back up. So the Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice in 2017 brought forth many years of research to say that we're handling our youth offenders, and when I say youth offenders, I say that lovingly, and I mean those kids who make mistakes, right? And I'm not talking about violent offenders or major offenses, but who commit minor offenses and could find themselves in juvenile court. And what we learned looking at the many years of research was that those youth offenders who were sent to juvenile court tended to have worse outcomes than those who were sent to a diversionary program. And that is, we believe that they network with other juvenile offenders when they're in the juvenile court, and they tend to learn maybe habits or thought patterns that they shouldn't. So the effort through House Bill 239 and 132 is to divert those nonviolent youth offenders, first-time offenders, to other programs. And we researched about 2 years ago starting a peer court, but we didn't believe that we had the offenses to really support it here in our high schools, in junior highs. They made some changes to the House bill when they came out with 132 that kind of allowed us to include some other offenses, and so we're off and running with a peer court. So just to talk a little bit about that, what happens is when a young person commits an offense, and it's their first offense, and they qualify, either the school administrator or the school resource officer or a patrol officer sends a case to our SRO Sergeant Lex Bell, and he looks at these cases and decides which ones are appropriate for a peer court. So the peer court's made up of panelists who are high school peers, high school members that are trained. We teach them to be professional and compassionate and give them options in terms of sentencing or what consequences they can offer. And so the program works by having this youth offender who qualifies. First, with their parent, they admit to the offense. So they're not really coming before the peer to argue their innocence or guilt, but they've already admitted to the offense. They come in. We have a panel of 9 or so youth that listen, and they ask questions. They ask questions of the offender, or they ask questions of the parent. They try to understand the circumstances surrounding the behavior. They try to get to the root of the behavior. And then they have at their disposal a number of different sentencing options that would include, for example, this is what we've seen this year, a youth offender who may have an interest, say, in automotive, learning to be a mechanic or an auto body worker, could be sent as part of their sentence to a technical college where they would spend a little bit of time learning about how to become a mechanic, and then they come back, they write a paper on that, and that could be part of their sentence. We also typically have them involved in community service, so they'll spend 8, 10, 12 hours doing community service. Sometimes we've had youth that are very interested or they love animals, and they've gone to a veterinarian clinic to do their service. So they come in before the panel, they bring their parents with them. Of our peer panel, someone in the peer panel is assigned to direct the proceedings, someone's assigned as a bailiff, and another person is assigned as a mentor. And the mentor connects with this youth offender, which we call a mentee, and they develop a relationship. And as the sentence is given or the consequence is given, the mentor follows through. There's also a time frame, so they have a month or maybe 3 weeks to complete whatever it is they've been assigned to do, and the mentor follows up with them. And then they come back and they report. We've had this year over 25 youth participate in our program. We meet twice in our courtroom, twice a month, and we've actually grown so fast that we've had as many as 15 youth that have wanted to come, but we haven't had the ability to handle that volume. So we're going to expand our panel to 2 panels next year to try and be able to handle more cases. So this is really a program that it's fantastic. I really commend our SROs and Lex Bell for the work that they've done in putting this together and pulling it off. And then our peer panel, the members of our community that participate with that really do fantastic service. Any questions on peer court?
Very cool.
Other than we like the picture on the posters that you guys are using for peer court.
Yes. Yes, there is a poster of the chief in the high schools. Our detectives also work in community-oriented policing, and many of you have been out to our Youth Academy, Citizens Academy events and other events that they work with, and they do a fantastic job in the community. We hope to and plan to continue to do those, and we could not do them without your support. So thank you so much for that.
And I think that really sums up our report, which is none of this could be possible without your support. We wanted to give you a police department that was efficient and professional, and I think we've exceeded that, and I hope that you would agree. I also wanted to provide you a report that wasn't flat and gave it some dimension, so hopefully having these fine command staff folks come and talk to you gave you that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I would like to mention one more thing on the peer court because we are so proud of that, and it is not easy to get certified by the state of Utah. We are full through the end of the year. We have no more kids that we can take on board. So we're going to try and get that second panel up and running as quickly as we can. But it really, I see sitting over here to my right, I'm just very, very proud, almost emotional that this is just such an amazing police department we've brought together. And again, with our partners in the Southwest region, we have a formidable police force. So, any questions?
Well done.
And technically, I did not talk long.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Now there's video for you to go to.
Hold on, Chief.
Thanks, guys. Move on to item 8, our consent agenda. Any comments, discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I'll second.
Motion second. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
David? Still with us?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. The motion passes, and we move on to items 9. How do we want to do, we're, the first one, 9.1, we're continuing. Do we need to officially do that, Jackie? Items 9.2 to 9.7, are we going to do those all together?
Public comment on 9.1, if there's anybody here on that.
Oh, well, I invite them to regular public comment. Do we have anybody that wanted to comment on the hunting ordinance? Then 9.2 to 9.7, are we presenting those all at once and then doing public comment after the full presentation?
Yeah.
All right. Whoever's up on that one. We've got, I guess I should read them all. Discussion and consideration of ordinance approving an amendment to the Master Development Agreement for Rosecrest Development. Discussion and consideration of an ordinance approving an amendment to the Master Development Agreement for the Creek Ridge Development. Discussion and consideration of a general plan amendment, request to rezone 75 acres of property located at 114 South Sentinel Ridge Boulevard from low-density residential and commercial to medium-density residential and planned development overlay zone for Edge Homes. Discussion and consideration of a proposed rezone of 75 acres from A1 to R210 for proposed development known as Mountain Ridge for Edge Homes located at or near 14011 South Sentinel Ridge Boulevard. 9.6, discussion and consideration of a rezone to apply the planned development overlay zone for proposed development known as Mountain Ridge for 75 acres property located at 14011 South Sentinel Ridge Boulevard for Edge Homes. And 9.7, discussion and consideration of an ordinance approving the master development agreement for Mountain Ridge Development. Bryn.
Good job. All right, so I'm gonna go through all of them. Obviously, ask questions as we go through it, but I'll just go through it all. I believe the applicant has a presentation, and then you can move forward however you would like. So the first item, 9.2, is a resolution amending the Rosecrest Development Agreement. So this is the entire Rosecrest plan as it is today. The property that we are talking about is this Pod 6C up on the north side of the property that will be part of the new Mountain Ridge project. So we need to remove it from the Rosecrest Development Agreement to then enter into the new Mountain Ridge Development Agreement. The agreement is fairly straightforward. Again, it just says we're removing this property legally described as such, and it is no longer part of Rosecrest. This is the legally described property that we're talking about 28 acres. So that's the Rosecrest Development Agreement. 9.3 is amending the Creek Ridge Master Development Agreement. This is the property here out west, just south of 118th. This amendment is proposed to remove 270 units from the total number of units. Currently, they are approved for 1,990 units. This proposal would reduce that down to 1,720 units. And again, fairly straightforward, just reduces the total to the 1720. This does not currently say which areas that would come from. So right now, this proposal just says 1720 overall with this new attached master plan. So those are the development agreements. Any questions on those so far? All right. 9.4 is for the general plan amendment. The general plan amendment is for approximately 75 acres on the very north side of the property that we're talking about. This is south of 134 and east of Mountain View Corridor. General plan amendment is a legislative decision. The applicant has to have an open house. They've had two. They had one in August and one in September. The Planning Commission needs to have a public hearing and make a recommendation, and they did that in December. The City Council now holds a public meeting and makes a final decision. That last phrase there, again, after the public meeting, the council can adopt as proposed, adopt as amended, or reject the application. This is the timeline of the various different meetings in which we've talked about this project. So again, the first application is the general plan. The property is, as you can see on the left, is currently commercial and low-density residential on the general plan. The proposal is to redesignate it to medium-density residential, which is 4.6 to 8 units per acre in the general plan. Skip that one. The Planning Commission recommended, the Planning Commission had a slightly different plan based on the changes with the school district. The Planning Commission recommended to change the general plan on all of the property on the east side of the road and a portion of the property on the west side of Sentinel Ridge, and leave the northern piece as commercial. And again, this was the plan that the Planning Commission had. This is the revised plan that you now have in your packet after talks with the school district and changing this one. They were previously swapping some property with the school district. This property no longer has that swap. So there is no longer a commercial component of this new plan. The rezone is for that same 75 acres on the north side. It's currently zoned A1. The proposal would be to zone it to R210, which goes up to 8 units per acre. The Planning Commission recommended a similar thing, which was to rezone those portions of the property and leave that remaining northern piece A1 in order for it to be commercial in the future. The third application is for the Planned Development Overlay Zone. This covers the entire 105 acres. Again, the process is similar. It is a legislative decision. They had 2 public meetings. They had a public hearing at Planning Commission. The plan development requires a site plan as part of that approval, which requires open space requirements, design guidelines, and details on all the amenities they would be providing. Final site plans for each phase of this will come back to the Planning Commission when they come back with final plats with all of the details of each individual lots. The City Council can adopt or reject the Planning Commission's recommendation or may make any revisions the council considers appropriate. So again, this is the plan that the Planning Commission saw, 600 units. This is the current plan in front of you. Again, this one is 625 units because they have removed the commercial portion of the property on the north side and put some units back in that area. This just zooms in. So this is a single family on the east side adjacent to the canal. The north side with the regional park that's about 10 acres. And then a townhome project north of the high school. There are design guidelines. You had the entire guidelines were in your packet, or on the website. This is just a few pages from the guidelines that kind of outlines some of the major points that they have in there. It includes the setbacks, parking requirements, minimum square footages for the homes, architectural standards, building materials, colors, windows, roof pitches. This goes over just an example of some of the average lot sizes. These are anywhere from 5,000 up to 15,000 square feet, just in this area here. This shows you the width of the streets. So again, you can see the solid green roads. There's larger roads to access where the churches and the schools and the parks will be. And then the primary roads and secondary roads are a little bit smaller. This one shows which roads are public versus private. So again, which ones the city will maintain versus the red, which are private, which would be HOA maintained. This is a rendering of what the slip lanes look like, the slip roads that will be down Sentinel Ridge. So again, allows homes to front the road without having to have the walls down the street, but provides that barrier with some additional parking there. This would be the local 53-foot road and then the alley. This is park strip ownership and maintenance, all the proposed landscaping, and the open space. Again, they have to have 20% open space. They are meeting the 20% open space using the areas shown here. Typical building elevations for single family. And then also for townhomes. So the last item is the Mountain Ridge Master Development Agreement. We've talked to the council about this several times in September and in November. We did include some changes as was talked about by the Planning Commission in December, but those changes have been slightly modified based on the newer plan. Talked with the council again in January. So again, this is just some highlights from the development agreement. You have the whole thing in your packet. The maximum units on the project would be 625. The development agreement limits the development on the Riverton portion of the property to 7.5 units per acre. That's the property south of 134, north of 138, that's currently in Riverton City. 138 will be a collector road, and so will be built by the applicant and reimbursed with impact fees. Half of that road is in Riverton and half is in Herriman. So the south half that they build will be reimbursed by impact fees. The large park, 10-acre park, and then the trail along the canal will be built by the applicant and reimbursed with impact fees and working with the city on what those amenities will be. The land, sod, and irrigation on the property will not be reimbursed. That's part of their detention requirements, but the amenities would be. Prior to their beginning on the project, the owner will dedicate or grant to the city an easement for storm drainage along the eastern side of the property up the canal. A portion of that's in Herriman and a portion is in Riverton. The owner will install the storm drain pipe that's necessary, and no building permits will be issued until that storm drain has been installed. There'll be a reimbursement agreement for the construction of the storm drain line. The city will not be responsible for the maintenance of the trail area. The homeowners association will be responsible for that. The city would be responsible for the maintenance of the actual storm drain pipe. Again, park strips, their HOA would be maintaining all of the park strips and slip lanes along Sentinel Ridge. The development agreement vests them under current code and laws with these few exceptions, including impact fees, any changes to state law, procedures, impact fees. Any amendments to the development agreement can be done in 3 different ways. A change to relocation of underground utilities can be done at the staff level, unless staff determines it needs to be kicked up to the council. If it is a change to the design guidelines, setbacks, architectural features, that would just go to planning commission. Any other changes, such as changing uses or densities, would require a formal amendment by the city council. And that is what I have for all of it. Any questions? Lots of questions? No questions? Okay.
None from us at the moment,
Okay.
sounds like. Public comment? Council?
Do you want to let the applicant?
You applicant first and then public comment?
What I would
All right,
recommend.
applicant. Steve?
Good evening, council and neighbors and staff in Riverton City. My name is Steve Maddox Draper, Utah. I'm not sure what happens as we get older, but we become emotional, so I appreciate the words earlier, and was involved in an accident or first aid on an accident that happened in Riverton, and it was amazing as individuals came and disregarded their own personal body as they protected vehicles and extricated, and it was quite an experience. So, same sentiment. I want to just start by saying thank you for the hundreds of hours. Sorry for the emotion that has been involved in this process. Thank you to the neighbors that have stayed with the process and in taking the time to actually understand what we are doing and caring enough to say this is not good for the kids and this is not good for the community and this is good for the community and this isn't good, and having a real voice in where we are today, which has been about a year-long process of meeting with individuals that I would now consider friends in this process. I have a very short presentation because it was described exceptionally well, and I think council understands the process. I want to represent that the owner of the property currently is the presiding bishopric and/or SLR as the facilitator, and I represent what they have allowed me to represent in proffering the items that are before us. I also want to perhaps just express the emotional side of the Riverton component of this, because the design and the desire from day one with Edge Homes and SLR was to have a congruent community. We have, as a development group, meaning SLR and Edge Homes, have been extraordinarily involved on the Herriman side. And I had a meeting on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. sharp because his schedule was full with the mayor in Riverton, where there is some frustration that we are not further along in this process. So I thank you publicly for allowing us to work through the major issues, as this is a significant responsibility to get this right because of the proximity and the overall acreage. So I believe that what we are presenting tonight is in harmony with not only what our desires are, but Riverton's desires and the connectivity, so that we should have a transparency between communities, because we don't believe that those that live in the community will say, okay, now we're entering a different city. So we would hope that the amenities, the trail connectivity, the roads, the joint road that we're building together, which will impact citizens in perpetuity, have all been included. I know there are some words that want to be expressed by Riverton tonight, so I will go to the next slide. I'm not even sure who has my PowerPoint.
You got a clicker right there.
Okay, thank you. I understand there's a delay, but I will be patient. This is the parcel. As you can tell, it's antiquated. The high school was not quite completed yet, but this is the parcel in question. This is our overall layout that you have in front of you tonight. The addition that was discussed earlier was the neighborhood park that is on the corner, the northeast corner of the Herriman portion that will be, we are proposing to have as a neighborhood park, and would be a passive park, not an active park for sporting events. So that is an addition and a change from what Planning Commission had recommended. These are the bullet point items that I would like to discuss tonight, and I'm going to go through them quickly, and then you guys can interject at any point and interrupt. This is the overall green space showing the connectivity to Rosecrest as it exists on the south side, and the connection through our programmable space that the Parks Department will inherit. We at this point are proposing to do, as Brent indicated, the dedication of land, sod, irrigation, and bathroom facilities and at that point, the city parks department can do as they desire. The other open space that we are proposing will be a combination of private and a combination of public. It is the desire of us to maintain the bulk of the residential component and pocket park, and the rest of it on the larger parcels to be maintained by the city.
Steve, real quick, what is the acreage of the, I know the other one's a little bit over 9 acres. What's the acreage of the other now proposed larger park there?
A little over 5 acres, about 5.25 acres. Yeah.
Thank you.
So a total of consolidated open space on the Herriman portion of about 16 acres. The rest of it that you will see will be private and not part of that. This is the concept as it ties into, this is the first that I have gone public other than what I had disclosed to the mayor on the Riverton portion. So again, this has not been vetted by them, but this is the connection. This was an idea of 2 council members on Herriman side and also on Riverton side to consolidate the green space. So between the 2 cities, we will have in excess of 20 acres of consolidated space. We met with the park directors 9 months ago to make sure that we did not have a redundancy of amenities. So we believe that there will be the ability to do programmable space and the ability to do park space for organized open field sporting events. I want to point out that the entire roadway that runs parallel with the parks is all going to be public access. These parks will be 100% in viewscape to the public. We should have, and I'm hoping that we have accomplished the goals of the police department to create more eyes on site, more parking on site, and create a beautification to the entire project in both communities and allow parking rather than having large, vast spaces of asphalt parking that will sit the majority of the time. That is, in our opinion, with Loci, the developer, a huge asset to the overall community. And then, of course, the trail corridor will follow along the entire east side of that and will connect up to and through 134th. Slip roads were an item that were the catalyst behind the majority of our design. When we began talking about this project, Sentinel was not open. I have sat out there. I would love to have a radar gun because the students' speedometers are broken. Our opinion is that we are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars as a development team to mitigate what I would consider an accident waiting to happen. And I think next year when we're looking at the report, I think that the heat maps, I would hope, would not reflect accidents because we have tried to mitigate and resolve and move children off that and create lines of sight that don't and wouldn't exist in a traditional neighborhood. We have talked about the slip roads. They are designed from an engineering perspective. They are incredibly expensive to do redundancy on a road, but we also believe that this will be a model community that does not exist in the state of Utah to this date and will create a viewscape that people will be able to identify as a community in which they live rather than the name of the community. This is, in some people's mind, a dream. I don't know whether it's a dream or not. I never thought the NBA would be canceled. There's a lot of things that happen. I don't know where the state funding will come from. I don't know if we win the lottery, but we have planned for an opportunity with the cross-section that both cities have prepared for, and there's sufficient right-of-way to be able to accommodate a light rail scenario within the middle of Sentinel and, once again, connecting the communities. In the meantime, we will stripe accordingly. We will create walkways, we will create carways, and we believe that this can be harmonious, not only short-term while we turn it over, but it would be long-term in the event that the state found funding. Number 3 is storm drain, which has been an item that has been examined and re-examined and examined and re-examined. We have gone back to the original concept, which is the flow of waters that have existed and have accumulated for years that need to get to a certain address that happens to be in the city of Riverton. We have designed a trail corridor in which that drain line would be drained to and through, and the connection through Rosecrest. I believe it was Jonathan today that forwarded us this schematic of this. So this is a city exhibit of all of the basins that we would be able to reclaim. And the water that is now sitting stagnant in Commissioner Shields' neighborhood would be able to be reclaimed. There would be some depths that would be able to be brought up. There are some grades that neighbors were concerned about life safety issues. There are open grates that exist today, and this would be something that we could go back in and claim. The highlighted on the right side in yellow, a reclamation of approximately 28 acres of open space and usable space for the citizens within that area. And any future expansion, including the campus that is proposed to go in there, that this would also be able to handle that stormwater. So this would handle all of the regional issues, I believe. These are the ponds as taken from aerials recently. They have become less than desirable areas because of the water that's handled. It is actually drowning any vegetation that is in there, and they become perhaps nuisances to those that are in the area, not only aesthetically, but non-usable. Creek Ridge reduction of 270 units. It was suggested in the work session earlier that there might be a sleight of hand and that we might suggest that there would be units that we couldn't use. That is not what I'm proposing. That is not what the presiding bishopric is proposing. If we have built on some of the land, we would deem those units gone. I believe this number in net would probably be closer to 300 units in a total reduction. The area that is in question would be area A, B, and C. We are agnostic as to where those units need to come from. I have had conversations, I believe, with each council member. SLR is in a position to remove those units wherever necessary. So we've put a placeholder in our development agreement, and we'll remove those as soon as we have direction from City Council. Riverton density cap. The question was asked how we cap. This is not a City of Herriman capping and telling the mayor and City Council that this is a cap and you can no longer. This is SLR capping what their development rights are based on the development agreement that they currently have with the City of Riverton. So this is a self-imposed SLR cap on the total units that will be built on the portion that has been referenced this evening. This is a concept of what we have proposed. We believe with LOSI's help on the design team that we have had congruity between communities. We have spent a lot of time on what the core will look like on Sentinel. We have spent a lot of time on the green space, and then we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out walkability, livability, and connectivity between communities. And once again, we have created those safe zones with the slip roads to and through Riverton City, and we have created pockets within Riverton City of green space that is similar in scope. Child first walking routes, which seems to be overlooked in development. We took a different approach on this because of the very first neighborhood meeting we had, where I had 4 mothers that had an accident happen, and it was an individual backing out of a driveway. I was asked if I would listen at that point. So this is how we have listened. This is how we have responded. These red roads that you see within the community right here are roads that do not have driveways backing onto them. So if you could picture in your mind's eye that every one of these roads will have sidewalks on them and would allow students or you and I to walk on this road without having a vehicle backing up while texting, talking, or being distracted otherwise. I think we have gone above and beyond what my wildest dreams were, but more particularly on the elementary school side, where if you look at the connectivity for students to be able to walk safely on a spring morning and not worry about that, I think we have almost eliminated the danger of a child being run over backwards or backed over and be able to get to the elementary school. The other item that came out of the neighborhood meeting is the location of the church house, which certainly does not have a conflict with buses en route because that is a vacant building at 8:30 or 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I think that we have achieved what we set out at the very first neighborhood meeting. Above and beyond all the other items that we've talked about, I hope that this is modeled in other communities. Once again, the slip road profile, the parallel parking in front of units, and the sidewalk that pulls pedestrians far off of traffic that is going to have a speed at some point of somewhere between 30 and 40 miles an hour. The last item that was brought up over and over with Planning Commission on the commercial portion that was proposed was an Arts Council building. I was not raised with the arts. I understand community connectivity. I understand that there are a lot of residents within this area kind of disassociated with other items within the city. This 5-acre neighborhood park at one point was proposed to be a non-programmable park. The idea that Planning Commission had was that this would be an ideal place to not only have civic events, but perhaps ticketed events, items to connect the community that don't today already exist with private funding that could come when the land was procured and handled. I would want some safety clauses that the ground would not sit in disrepair and that we would work feverishly to be able to raise funds and come up with what that's going to look like. So this is not my idea. This is an idea that came with some of the negotiations of council members. This came with Planning Commission. And then as I began to talk to the community about what is needed in this area, it felt like a great monument coming into the city. And as I read more about what these do to the culture within communities, it was much more than what I had originally pictured when I sat at the same podium and it was suggested. I thought it was an art museum. So if you don't understand what an Arts Council facility is, it was intriguing to understand everything that is happening within these Art Council buildings throughout the nation. Last item that I would like to address, which has been talked about, is the corner, the most prominent corner probably right now that exists within the city for commercial application, which would be on the corner of 134th and Mountain View Corridor. This is a site that has sat dormant. This is a site that has some challenges from grading issues. There are hundreds of thousands of yards of undocumented fill here, which makes this site spooky for commercial users. The SLR group has pledged to remediate this corner, prepare it, ready it for the eventuality of what we would hope would be a monumental corner that would be done in a time period that is acceptable to City Council. These are the wrap-ups. The consolidation of the master development agreement with Rosecrest, which will eliminate all rights associated with the 28.8 acres that exist currently. The Creek Ridge amendment that would eliminate 270 in addition to whatever else would not be procured, which I could come up with that number to be very pinpoint accurate on that. And then the eventual adoption of the Mountain Ridge Master Development Agreement, which would incorporate the balance of everything that we have talked about. This is the layout that we are proposing this evening, and I thoroughly thank you for this experience that I have had professionally and personally. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Questions?
Steve, yeah, can I ask you a quick question before you sit down?
Of course.
Thank you. Obviously, there's been some changes, as you noted in the plan, from what was presented and then a recommendation coming out of Planning Commission. And we know that some of that had to do with, potential movement or swapping of land with the school district, which that has changed that. And then an updated plan that was presented to us tonight, which just basically moved a few of your units around and made that park space bigger on the north side. But can you just walk us through from, I guess, what has precipitated from your side the changes from from the plan that was presented to Planning Commission and those changes, again, understanding that the school district was part of that, but what those changes were that bring us to the plan that's in front of us today, and why you believe, that this is the best of those plans to now present to us.
Yeah, thank you for the question. There was a decision that was made based on a recommendation from a gentleman that's here tonight that I'm sure will speak, that the condominiums were something that the neighborhood was not necessarily in favor of, was not in love with. We wiped out about 150 units and went to 2-story buildings rather than 3-story buildings, which created a situation for us that began a frenzy of activity with Planning Commission to suggest that maybe there was an opportunity to capture some commercial. So Adam made a recommendation that we go to 14.5 acres of commercial. There were subsequent meetings with some council members and the school board to discuss the potential for some land swaps that we felt were a viable option. It was represented to me through the board and through city council and staff that the school district currently is not interested in a land swap. They feel like they want to preserve the corner. They feel like to give up a parcel is not the position that they want to be in, nor do they want to be in the development business. It created a situation for SLR that they felt as if that corner needed to be preserved differently than just residential housing. And that's where the acreage and the removal of additional units, so we are down at another reduction to 625 units, as you saw this evening, and a consolidation of green space. So this took one more opportunity for us to refine what we're doing and to create what we think will be perhaps the greatest amenity of a community, which is just visibility and open space. So that's what we've created on the corner there. So we have reduced it down to townhomes, no condominiums, and no commercial component, because the Jordan School District would like to rest with what they have there. There was suggestion at some point in the future, if the city of Herriman could find a more suitable location, the school district would be open to a land swap, and that parcel currently is zoned commercial, and at some point that could be a viable component for commercial, is my understanding from the school board. I don't want to make representation. There was a school board member here earlier that could speak to that, but that's my understanding, and there were council members at the meeting.
And then this latest revision that from what was in our packet to what we see before us tonight really just, again, takes, from my understanding, and I want to make sure I'm understanding it, is again, you just consolidated, you didn't lose any units from what that plan was to this one, but you consolidated them and reorganized that differently to open up more contiguous open space in that neighborhood park. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So I have tried to work with the negotiators, with city council members, with staff to say, what does 5 acres do if this eventually could become an arts council facility? We took a boilerplate from Silicon Slopes. 5 acres gives us X amount of square foot for a building and X amount of parking. And we were shy a little bit on that acreage on the original presentation that you have. So this is a push, pull, create an additional 1.5 acres to get that 5.25 acres on the green space on the corner.
But again, that was done in an effort that centered around this concept of potentially an arts.
That's correct.
Facility of some sort and trying to get that contiguous land together.
That's correct.
That's what.
Yes.
Drove those changes.
Yeah, so we had some pocket parks, we had some scattered green space, which I would deem usable aesthetically, but not as we would have with the regional parks that we have in Herriman and Riverton, and just began the tedious task of CAD, and were able to come up with that additional acreage.
Okay.
Once again, our proffer is to deed that ground free, clear, and say, please, let's do something together on that. If that is not the desire, because somebody has an interest that they think would be better or just green space, then we would roll that into the consortium of public open space, and we would do what we are proposing on the regional park. That is something that I think City Council can discuss, and something that can be done at final plat approval. It does not need to be decided today. I have made phone calls to individuals that have supported other large event centers within the state of Utah who have desires to be part of that movement. I don't know how important that is to the community as a whole.
Okay, and if I can, one more final question for you.
Yes.
Just speak to this plan that we're seeing now in front of us. I guess the work that you have done with the current property owner and SLR, just to get us to where we're at and what is being presented as far as the density that's here. What was the deciding factors for you to present this plan, given how it's laid out and the density that's currently in it?
Could you refine your question? I think I'm going to answer something that you didn't ask.
I think the question is why.
I guess explain, or I don't want to know if I want to use the word justify, but give us the reasoning for this layout. And I think we're just right around 6, a little bit over 6 units to the acre over the whole development as currently proposed. So just for us and for those listening, why that number? What is it that gets this plan for us?
I understand now. Thank you. I have a peculiar seller. I have a seller that I sit in front of and have to justify streets. I have to justify open space. I have to justify why I'm doing what I'm doing. And a seller that actually cares. The word earlier was that SLR wants to be a partner. Edge wants to be a partner. And there has been jostling, there has been pushing, because every movement that we have done affects the economics. We have not gone back to the city and said, well, you know, we've squozed this and so we want this. And I have been asked by, I believe, every council member, as you reduce this, are you reducing what you have offered? We have kept, from day one, we have kept the slip roads and the open space and the trail and the storm drain and every other bullet item that we've talked about, and we have taken a reduction. And I have a seller that has grabbed my hand and said, okay, because we want something that we can be proud of as sellers, but also a legacy to Herriman and a legacy to the community and a legacy to Riverton. So I have not been in a position in my 20 years of development where I have had a seller say, let's make this thing absolutely work, and then we'll call Alan to see if the numbers work. We went at this from a design perspective and said, what is right for the community? What is right for the residents that live there? What is right for, as been described, a lot of folks living in this area? Sentinel was a big addition. The connection of 138th are tremendous additions. The addition of the park space, as you can see, we had 2 individuals that said, let's do less homes and get rid of the park, and they were booed openly. It was uncomfortable at the second neighborhood meeting. And so I think just listening and then going back to SLR and sitting in front of President Romney, Steve Romney, president of SLR, and saying, can we shave, can we reduce, can we continue to do this? Steve Romney made a poignant remark to me, and that is that he wants the HOA to maintain slip roads so that in 10 years, 15 years, I will be held accountable for what they look like and not blame the city if there's a weed or a rock or if ordinances change and it goes from this to that. So there has been a lot of ownership from SLR to say, we care.
Thank you.
So I do not want to take the credit because I had a seller that was with us every step of the way. So every time I met with individuals on council and neighborhood, I went back to SLR to get permission for what we are doing, including all of the other items that are not related to this 105 acres. Those are all concessions that SLR, not willingly, but we're willing to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
I have a question I think I'd like Bryn to answer. In the packet here, I've seen 2 different renderings and 2 different outlines of what the Planning Commission had reviewed and recommended. One has 546 units with 14 acres of commercial. The other one has 600 units with commercial space. Can you explain what the difference between those 2 are? Because I'm not sure. My understanding was they had recommended the 546 units and the 14 acres, but there's another one you showed in here that had 600 units. And so I'm trying to figure out where the discrepancy comes from.
Sure. So the plan that the Planning Commission saw, and I apologize, I can't pull it up on the screen, is the one that included the switch with the school district and was the 600 units. They made the recommendation right in their motion to take that top half and add the additional property and make the 14 acres of commercial. So they never actually had a plan that looked like that. They made a recommendation off of the plan they had in front of them. So then we made the rendering that kind of shows it all in red to show where they had called out for the commercial, but they never actually had that plan.
So their recommendation would have included the removal of those units down to
Right,
that
and that's why it was
546
the 546 or whatever, because it was to remove the units from that top pod and make that piece commercial.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But was there, at that time that the planning commission did that, was there also a contemplation of maybe of a time frame that if commercial didn't come into that area, that there were units that potential units assigned to that could come back in?
They
And
talked, yeah.
And what was that number if I can't remember if they had a specific number
They
tied to it.
didn't, they talked about a time frame, and John and I suggested to them that that would come in the development agreement. It really shouldn't be
Okay.
part of the zoning approval. It really needed to be in the development agreement. But they did talk about, like we said, the 8 units per acre, I think is what it was, that they recommended should go there. But that really wasn't, that was just a recommendation they made. It wasn't really part of their official
Okay.
motion, because we knew that would come later in the development agreement.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the Planning Commission, but I will restate a conversation I had with the Planning Commissioner regarding that 8 units per acre number. They felt that there would be a, for lack of a better term, again, these are my words, not his words, a detriment to the developer to have to sit on that land for a period of time, waiting for it to be developed as commercial. And therefore, as a reward or a bonus for waiting that extra time, they were recommending an increase in density up to the 8.
For that particular parcel.
Right.
Okay.
In my conversation with Chris, he reiterated that the elimination of commercial, he would not be in favor of recommending the 8 units per acre.
Right, different set of circumstances.
Right, different
currently, right.
So he would, one is a reward for holding the commercial. If the commercial is eliminated, he doesn't continue to support that 8 units. So just to clarify, again, I'm not speaking for them, just reiterating a conversation I had with Chris, so.
And I would also, I'd just add to that, when they said the 8 units per acre, they were talking about the entire commercial piece, the 14 acres, of which 5 acres was the school district property at the time. So it would have covered a much larger area than just what we're looking at here.
Okay.
Now public comment?
That'd be good.
Public comment, I've got 2 sheets. Scott Lockwood.
I just have 2 comments. So a lot of this looks pretty good. I'm not sure that I follow exactly where the commercial, what's happening with the commercial. Is that big block to the west, the big gray block on the, is that, I don't know if that's the commercial, but anyway, and I just heard what you said about the trade-off between commercial and density. I would like to, we all know that we need a bigger tax base for commercial in Herriman. And I personally would like more opportunities to spend my money in Herriman and not so much in Riverton. I've started shopping at Ace Hardware, and I started buying my tires at Intermountain there next to the neighborhood Walmart, and I look for other opportunities to keep my money in Herriman. And so I hope we can hang on to that and make something of it. And the second part is just the density. A lot of this looks really nice, and if we could just keep the density down, this 8 units is, I mean, we got this big uproar about Olympia Hills, and this is going in right across the street from where I live and many of you. And all that area south, this, that atrocity of high-density housing as you drive down the corridor, both sides, I mean, it's just, why do we need more high-density housing? And why does this plot need to have more of it? And so I would just urge the council to bring it down from 8. I don't know all the politics that are involved in that, but we just don't need more high-density housing with this traffic and all of the burden that comes along with that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Next one I have is Courtney Poole.
Hi. So I have attended all of the neighborhood meetings and planning commission meetings and all of these different meetings. So I have seen all the iterations of this too. And I agree, the density, it's a hard pill to swallow. And I'd say it's probably our neighborhood's #1 concern. However, when I look at the compromises that the builder and the landowner has made, I can see a middle ground. And I think that with the amenities that are being given to the area, that it's worth it. I think we find ourselves in a difficult position because of what has been approved in the past and what has been approved just north of us in a different city. And it's my understanding that we maybe have 250 units we could eliminate here. And if those 250 units get added just north of 138, have we really changed the density of the area? Have we changed the traffic? Have we changed the school? It's my opinion that that doesn't change, but we have given away all our amenities if we do that. So I would say that it's a good middle ground. And lastly, I just think that the amenities should not be passed on to the cost should not be passed on to the future residents. I was talking to Steve about this earlier with a PID, so I just want to state that for future conversations, because I think that would eliminate the benefits if the cost is just passed on to the residents. So thank you.
Those are the only comment forms you have filled out. If anybody else would like to comment? So I knew that Mayor Staggs wanted to comment, but he didn't fill out a form.
I didn't fill out a form, so hopefully the chair will allow me to comment, and maybe even more than 2 minutes. I wanted to say a few words. First of all, thank you for being able to work with all of you in various capacities, meaning to include the law enforcement. You have a phenomenal police force. We enjoy working with you all there, and had the chance to serve with many of you on respective boards, and then even with the Southwest Visioning Study that we're currently underway. And I think it really is, it kind of speaks to this development here. The idea behind the Southwest Visioning Study is to try to think more regionally as we're all acting locally. And this is a pretty challenging development in as much as it spans, two municipal, a municipal border. So I wanted to say one thing and then make 2 comments on the MDA. The first is with respect to discussions that have been had, and not with all of you at the same time, so I'm glad you're here. I wanted to be able to address it just publicly, with respect to a boundary adjustment. So conversations were had. One option with this development was to include it all within one city. And for reasons that, the landowner and the builder may have, that I could see how it could be easier working with one city instead of 2. So we had those conversations. They were progressing, I think, in good faith, and we made what I thought was a high-level outline of an agreement. And in that agreement, it allowed for density to be lowered not just in Creek Ridge, but then also, if the entirety of this project area was within Riverton, it would allow the number of units in the entirety of our master development agreement to go down, and to go down substantially. And I felt like, again, the high-level outline was a win-win-win for everybody across the board. In the long run, it actually costs us more, it would, Riverton, to be able to maintain and operate that development going forward. But that was a proposal that was on the table. It was never an attempt by me or any member of our council to be a land grab. It wasn't ever intended to be viewed in that way at all.
And I think it was just in the larger context or this narrative of being able to reduce overall density throughout the project area and add additional park space and open space, which we found is one of the principal things that people want in our Southwest Visioning study. That said, this is a decision that is entirely up to you. This section is within your city, and I respect the land use authority that you all hold. So I just wanted to be able to say that. With respect to the 7.5 units, yes, on my side, I really don't want any more than 7 units to the acre. This is, redounds back to an agreement that was made in 2016, a master development agreement with our city and with the landowner. But I just will point out that we are not a party to this agreement. Riverton City is not. So in as much as it's reflected here in the MDA that it wouldn't exceed that amount, there's really no mechanism from our side to be able to enforce that, and just operating on really the goodwill of the developer and the property owner at this point. The 2 points quickly on the MDA. Reading through it, our staff highlighted just on page 73 of your staff report, it says, I quote, "Owner will grant to city a broad form perpetual public easement acceptable to, and the city shall maintain and repair the underground storm drain pipe for the entire stretch of the storm drain located in both Herriman and Riverton." In reading this, I just want to point out, I think that's a typo. I think what was intended to say is that the broad form perpetual public utility easement, and not just granting such a blanket easement, which might prove problematic for our city. As we are totally, I think, on board with the easement concept and for the public utility of stormwater, and allow Herriman City to have access to repair the pipe if needed. But I think a blanket easement could be problematic, and I don't think that's what was intended, is that Herriman City would want to then have basically what amounts to a taking or a property right in a city that isn't yours. So I would just request respectfully that the council look at that. Any ratification or adoption of a final MDA, that you look at that language that was there. And then just lastly, I want to say, I want to express my appreciation for you all requiring a planning, or a traffic study, rather, to include the portions within Riverton. And I think this will assist us in our efforts to be able to evaluate the traffic patterns throughout the project. And also wanted to express my thanks to all of you. We have been talking for quite a while. Also to the developer, the applicant here, and the property owner. Many hours have been put together on this, and many options have been thrown out there. One of which was the one I alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, was the boundary adjustment. So, but I think again, it was for the reason of trying to look at the good of the entirety of our two cities, and how we can best make a deal work with a development that's spanning, two municipalities. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Staggs. Any other public comments?
My name's Lauren Smith. I just want to say I've been pretty involved with what was going on with Olympia Hills, and I'll say that this experience is a whole lot different than that. It is nice to have a developer, and it is nice to have a landowner that's been a lot more reasonable, and also to a council that listens. We found that the county doesn't listen at all. I do want to say that I am not, this is a bitter pill to swallow. It's not as bitter as it used to be, but it's still, for a resident on that side of the community, if you go down Sentinel Boulevard and you head south, you pass the stadium, that's a nightmare down there. And it's only going to be made worse by the continued building down there, and then also what's happening at the end of Rosecrest with those condos or whatever is going to go down there. Our portion of the community has taken the brunt of the density. I would always be a proponent of less. because I think it's going to be a traffic nightmare. I drive Sentinel every morning to 134 South. It gets busy every day. It is fast. I have to set my cruise control just to kind of not get swept away with the traffic along there. I will say, however, that this iteration of this project and dealing with Steve, I think this is as good as we're going to get to be able to get the things that we need. My only other concerns would be where the location of the parks are. They're up against Riverton, which is great, especially that big long park. But we would like to have some closer to us in Herriman at some point as well. A lot of those residents that are going to be living in the Riverton side are going to have a lot more accessibility to those Herriman parks. But I will say I am overall happy with the process. I'm happier with the total outcome. I am very happy with especially Steve and even SLR for being able to work with us. And I would say that I would be behind this because I think I've seen the hard work and what's come of it to this point.
Can I ask one question? Lauren, I'd like to ask you, and maybe Courtney too. Scott Lockwood commented on his desire to see commercial be maintained in this area, and he stated his reasons. Could you opine on your opinion regarding commercial and its viability and its necessity, what you'd like to see happening in this area?
I will let you know that my background is a federal probation officer and not commercial development. So we will come as totally an uneducated opinion and observation. Fair enough? All right. I was thinking about that actually today because I drove up 134 South trying to avoid 126 that's under construction. And in my mind, I was thinking, when Olympia Hills comes in, it's going to even be worse. And then I thought, if I was going to go somewhere to buy something, would I come to Herriman to do it? No, I won't, because I can't get through the traffic. So I think that a certain part of the commercial is a pipe dream, honestly. It depends on the type of commercial that we have and what it's used for. I think as we increase the population, it depends on what the commercial is going to be. And is it going to best serve the people that are in the city, or are we going to look for some kind of destination commercial? Because I think destination commercial fails. I honestly am most excited about the piece of property that's over Mountain View Corridor behind the CVS. I think it's most accessible for Mountain View Corridor. It probably will promote the most beneficial commercial to Herriman. And you're right. We're kind of buying the future with and we're leaving we're kind of buying the present but leaving the future alone because we're not getting those long-term benefits of commercial. But we are getting a lot in impact fees and those types of things. That's great. But impact fees run out and they're not renewable. Commercial tax base is renewable. We do need more of that.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
And Courtney, would you
Open
answer
mic
too?
night.
The reason, let me be clear. The reason I'm asking this question is you're the only three residents here speaking out on this issue, and I'm going to exploit you a little bit because I'd really like to get your opinions and your understanding of this because we know this is a hot button topic for the residents of this area. I'm disappointed that only three came out tonight.
Quick question: are those
I'm
the
gonna
only
ask you
three?
guys to
Is there
comment.
anybody else that wanted to comment on this? All right.
Okay.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I also am not a professional in this area, so I don't know the viability there. I think the whatever you had approved just south near the Real interchange, I think that has a lot more potential right there because there is that main intersection off of Mountain View. And I also think further south near Porter Rockwell, we'll get people from Bluffdale and Lehigh coming to that intersection. So I think that would be a lot more successful than that little corner of 138. And just to piggyback off of that, the retail they have planned in the Bella Via development, I don't know how that's gonna go. You guys know what I'm talking about? Under the apartments they have there? That seems just way unlikely to me, but that's my opinion. Anything else?
No, it's good.
No?
Thank
Okay.
you.
Any other public comments? If you want to ask anybody else questions? All right. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment for tonight. Discussion by council.
I appreciate, I'll just say I appreciate first off, the public that's here to be part of this process. The opinions, like Steve said, they are important to us. We want to be able to hear that, and I know that we've had a good group of our residents that have been well involved in this process, and so I appreciate hearing from your perspective what you have seen and experienced being part of that process. I appreciate the applicant and the landowner both for, this has been a long process. You go back to the timeline that Bren put up, tonight, this has been a long process, but yet I just want to thank you for hanging through as we have labored through some of the other challenges that we've been faced with in there. I think that we have a few things that we need to, again, we saw a plan that had some minor changes in it tonight for the first time. We certainly need to go back and look at those, look at any potential impact as they relate back to the development agreements and those types of things. So we'll take that time to do that, but I just simply wanted to say thanks to everyone that's been involved in the process, including the council.
I'm still stuck on commercial. I've been a steady drum on that. I like that comment, buying the present but leaving the future alone. I don't think as city council members we can afford to do that. I think our responsibility is to look to the future many, many years down the road. So I am disappointed that I don't see any of it carved out. I feel like we're back to where we were in June and July, back to saying we're not willing to do any of the commercial. So that's, to me, disappointing. And I still have, I think that there's a lot of good things that have been done in this, but I'm back to the worrying about if we can sell out our future for what we're dealing with today. So I'm definitely struggling with this. I have many questions that were spoke in the work meeting dealing with this, and we'll continue to have some more. Well, I assume that we'll see this back in a couple of weeks. So that's my comment.
You had your chance. You asked questions.
It's interesting because when I first announced I was running for office is about the time that this came up. And so it has been with me since almost day one. And spent a lot of time being very involved in some of the discussions and public meetings and things that were happening before I was elected. And it has not ceased since that time. I'm going to just say a few things, but I just want it to be understood in the context of I really believe in the value of a council, and that the differences of opinions and positions, I think, are a source for us to come up with better answers and better ideas. There have been some statements or rumors that I have a vote one way or the other. I'd like to disabuse anybody of that idea. I definitely see a lot of benefits to the evolution of this project from where it started to where it is now. I think there's a lot of wins. I appreciate the comments about reasonable compromise, not exactly what you wanted, but maybe not as bad as it could have been. I appreciate those comments, and I would agree with a lot of those sentiments. That being said, I still think there is a process as a council that we need to go through. There's some deliberation that we need to have. For lack of a better term, there's some arguments we need to get through in order to make sure that we have asked each other the important questions and fully considered the issues that this has. And my vote won't be made up until that process is completed. So I want to be clear about that. Even with the differences of opinions, I've come to really value all the other fellow members of the council, and they ask really hard questions that make me work. I really appreciate it. It keeps me on my toes. It makes me do a lot of research. All these other council members are far more experienced and knowledgeable about these subjects than I am, and so I've had to spend a lot of extra time trying to catch up, especially around this project. That being the preface, I'd like to say I went back and read the balanced economy study that was done in 2018. I've heard it referenced kind of anecdotally in a lot of conversations over the past 6 months. And I've read it, I don't know, 4 times now, highlighted, cross-referenced, looked up, asked staff about it. They beat me up about it today. I beat them up about it today. And I want to talk about a couple of the conclusions that came out of that, a couple of the data points that came out of that I think are relevant to our discussion, not proving a point or anything, but they're discussion points. So it said that the amount of commercial space that Herriman would need in order to generate an economic base that would replace the fee income we're getting, there's a range, but it comes out to something around 500-ish acres, maybe up to 540 acres kind of on a high end. And that's kind of the reasonableness for commercial expectations for our city. Now, at the time that the report was done, it said that we had general planned a little over 700 acres in the city, general planned for commercial, 703, I think is what it was. And that was based on a 2014 general plan. In 2018, the council, based on some of the information in this report, made a decision to expand the general plan of commercial from that 703 acres to over 1,000 acres. I'm not going to go back and criticize past council, but I do have some questions about the reason for that expansion of commercial space when the report didn't necessarily justify that, and whether or not we have, if 14 acres in this location is necessarily making or breaking any plans in Herriman City. Again, I'm not necessarily arguing the point at this juncture, but I have questions. I think we're all in agreement we need to build the economic base in Herriman. I'm excited about the aspect of this, the number 8 on your list, Steve, about the grading and preparation and mitigation of that corner. I think that's the crown jewel of corners in this part of the valley. And we would hope to really make that something special, something that really brings value into this community. I think we all have hopes and dreams for that. So knowing that commercial is a key part of not only what the Planning Commission recommended, but is something that members of this council have been advocating for, I want to make sure that we're having a reasonable discussion about that as we go forward. We really are considering the pros and cons of that, what that impact might be, not only for this area, but what it might mean for our city on a broader scale. And set aside maybe some of the rhetoric around it, some of the emotions around it, and really kind of get into some of the data, what it suggests, and how this might compare to, Alan talked about some of that earlier, how this might compare if we had retail versus if it was only houses, and there's a trade-off for some upfront money versus long-term money, and I think we need to talk about that as well. I guess I just want to, the reason I'm bringing this up is I want the citizens to understand that as we're going through this process, there's a lot of work and effort and energy and research and time and so many meetings that go into making a decision like this. It didn't just come up before the council and suddenly we're gonna, okay, yep, this is it. This has been months and months and months and months, and it's been evolving and changing. And so I think we're getting to a point where a decision is going to need to be made by this council. There's a request for us to make a final decision. But I want to make sure that we're doing it right. I think it's been the, I wouldn't call it the policy, but let's say it's the tradition of this council, when there are large things like this that involve so many things, general plan, zoning, MDAs, complex like this, that we wouldn't take action on something without having everything in front of us, having the public make a final comment on the final idea, and then taking that 2 weeks to review all of those comments and fully consider before we make a final decision. So I don't know if that means we need another 2 weeks or another 4 weeks. I hope it's not another 6 or 8 weeks necessarily. I don't think any of us want this any more than that. But I'm fully vested in making sure that we go through a proper process. That was, talked about earlier today. That I don't think there's any, at least from my perspective, I don't want any circumvention of a full, honest, open, detailed discussion about this. And again, I'm going to solicit the public, please give us your feedback. Facebook doesn't count. Come to these meetings. If you can't come, fill out a card, send it in. We'll read it into the record here. You don't necessarily have to attend the meeting to have your voice heard. But we really want, now that this is public, people can review this video, review it, talk about it, give feedback to the city, not just to us as members of the council, so that we can make it an official part of what we're deliberating here. And I think that if we do that, we'll come up with a pretty nice solution to this one way or the other. So, I mean, that's all I got for tonight. I think there's more to be discussed, but.
Well, I think that this part is important, as well as our work meetings, no matter how emotional they get. That's what we wanted, at least that's what I begged the county council to give us with Olympia Hills. My public comments to them was, I said, we want to hear your deliberation. We want to hear what you all think.
Yeah.
We never got that. We never got to see any of it in any way, shape, or form in a work meeting. I attended several, and we all have other jobs. So at some point, I'll agree with Steve that fatigue sets in. This has been almost a year, right? And while it's you guys' full-time job, it's not ours, right? And we've spent countless hours, extra meetings over that period of time. So at some point, I think we do get tired and want it to be done, but there's a commitment from everyone here to do it right, however long that takes. I want to just address a couple of the questions that were raised. Been accused in the past when public is making comments that I'm not paying attention when I'm taking notes so that I can address your questions when it's my turn. So if my head's down and I'm writing, I'm taking notes. I wanted to address a couple of them here, if I can find where I wrote it down, my 3 pages tonight. Mr. Lockwood asked about the commercial. We need a bigger tax base. Everybody knows that. We talked about that earlier tonight. The financial analysis, et cetera. We need balance. We need a balance of uses. We need a community, and that balance helps different areas be successful. If it's all one thing that we think is the most productive, if we had 80% commercial retail and only a handful of homes, I guess those homes would be okay with the services they get, but their experience wouldn't be balanced. They probably would have more crime leaking into them from those other areas, et cetera. So there's all sorts of things that go into a balanced plan. When it comes to the general plan and commercial, I guess I'll answer these two kind of in the same breath. Councilman Shields mentioned the study that was done. What was also mentioned in that study was that we need to preserve any and all commercial frontage along Mountain View. But like the lifeblood of retail commercial, which we were told earlier tonight by our financial director, is the thing that you want. Every business I work with, every May when we go to that convention in Vegas and talk to all the different businesses, the developers, et cetera, the number one thing is not how many people live around that area, it's how many people drive by that business every day. They want to be on major traffic corridors. Mayor Staggs mentioned the Southwest Visioning Study, which I've been our representative on for the last year and a half or so. And the number one thing is commercial frontage, right? Freeway frontage. And we look at our map, this is all we have is Mountain View, right? And there are literally only a couple of spots left along Mountain View. We've let homes be built all along it. Other areas, other acreage that's been set aside is further in the city that may never develop, which is why, from that recommendation, we unanimously agreed that, yeah, this is one piece that we have to try and preserve if we can, because the frontage is what matters. We don't have very many, even arterial roads coming in and out, 134th, 126th. We've already allowed homes to be built up along the sides. There's not a whole lot of opportunity left, no matter what colors we've painted on a map ourselves. So there's a lot. I think there's a lot of discussion to be had there. The commercial tax base is important right now. We are dependent about. I mean, it's been getting better the last couple of years as the economy's improved, and we've gotten more share of population. Which I digress. Please fill out your census. We'll receive more sales tax money if we have an accurate population count. But we're working hard to be less dependent on the one-time money, but we are very dependent on one-time money right now. 30 to 40% of our budget is one-time money, which means permits and fees from building. We get that money, we pay for things, and it's gone. Eventually, when things are built out, we have to still pay all the services, and where does the money come from? At that point, if we haven't done a good job, then we have to increase property taxes to keep plowing the roads. So it is a huge concern, and for me, I asked Bryn to put this picture back up. The blank section that is the frontage is owned by Jordan School District, and they can build a school there tomorrow, even if it's zoned commercial. State laws that they can put a school wherever they want, the high school right next to it. We've had lots of talks with them, and they asked us to exclude that from this plan. They want to be in control of their own property, but they did tell us that they were willing to work with us if we could find a different site for that school to go to free that up for commercial development. So we're working hard on that. I can go through the list of the things that I think are good about this plan and the trade-offs. My only heartburn is that really all I'm asking is the wording that was referred to from the Planning Commission, that remaining portion that we have designated as commercial that butts up against that we be given a chance to let that develop. It may not, and there would be that reward, but all I'm asking for is for wording in the MDA that gives us a chance, a time frame. I mean, there's a number of ways to spell it out. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't be talking about that auto mall property. That was all entitled to be residential, actually high-density residential. I, as a resident, came in and was involved in this process, ironically with Creek Ridge, but got involved after that with the next one and suggested, what if you put it in the MDA that you have a certain period of time to develop that as commercial? And look where we are now. We're not there all the way, but we had to give ourselves a chance. If we didn't give ourselves a chance with that property, it would be apartments right now. All I'm asking for with that portion is give us a chance. If it doesn't happen within the confines of whatever we agree to, then it can turn into more residential and build the rest first. In regards to the density, 8 is a lot, but the total acreage, remind me, what's the overall density of the whole thing? It's that, I think.
Of the whole thing is like 6.15, 6.2, basically.
The overall density is less than 8. They were referring to one small section. I hope that answers that question. Why do we need more? In my opinion, we don't need any more. 0. I'd be happy with no more actual density whatsoever. The reality is that property owners are entitled. Agreements were made to before any of us were sitting up here that give them those units on that property, and we have to work within the confines of those. I think what complicates this particular project, and maybe it was more the question that you were asking earlier of why the change in the plan, right? Because there's existing zoning, there's existing general plan. Why are we making this big a change? And it's to shift density from farther west, where there's a compounding effect. This is what I've been preaching at the legislature for the last 2 months, and in our Southwest Visioning studies. There's a compounding effect. We put more density on the edge. One car turns into 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 as we go in. We should get less dense as we go farther out. This happens to be the same property owner, and they're willing to shift some of that from Area A to Area B. The question that we've been wrestling with, is it the right thing to do? Is it the right way to do it? Do we get enough in return for it? I'll speak to that a little bit. I think when I mentioned fatigue, we've had these discussions for almost a year, but I think there's a lot of people that are either here tonight or watching or listening or will watch or listen that haven't been privy to those conversations. I've been pretty consistent. Mr. Maddox can call me out on this if I'm not. But as far as that density, I've been concerned from day one. And full disclosure, that's what got me involved in this is the other project, Creek Ridge. That is my backyard, and that's what got me coming out and had this similar experience as Steve, and now I'm sitting up here. It would greatly benefit me and my neighbors to move those units from the west to the east, absolutely. But I think I've been almost the most stringent in pushing back on that idea. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the right way to do it? Are we getting enough? If we can actually get a net reduction, that helps that narrative, right? We're actually reducing, not just shifting, although there's merit to that idea. My issue with density in general is not that density is bad, but the effects of density when you don't have the proper infrastructure are bad, right? The way I look at density, population density, is you put too many people in one spot and there's a lot of pressure. And if you don't have the adequate open space and roads and things to those pressure relief valves, then you end up with bigger problems. I'm looking at my friends over there who can probably attest to that very thing, right? That's the problem that we have before us, is trying to balance those things out. Are there the necessary release valves, if you will? So the roads, and these are conversations that I've had with Steve and Mr. McKay from SLR and others, is that we can't hold them accountable for mistakes that were made up the road. I totally agree. Stuff that's been built down the road, eyesore, too dense. Previous councils, frankly, have given away the open space in those areas, right? When you get density like this, there's supposed to be a 20% open space requirement. Where is it? What was given away, literally, right? Some of us, a little bit to RSL, I think. Most of it to Salt Lake Community College. There should be like a 30-acre park over there, but it's going to be a college campus, right? That's where that went. But at the same time, I can't hold Steve Maddox and SLR responsible for that. That's not their property. That's not the deal they made. This is their property. But we can't let what he does on this property negatively compound that bad decision, right? Or else we'll be as bad as the county with Olympia Hills, right? So what we pushed back on was we don't want all the little pocket parks that are aesthetically pleasing to these architects and things. We want places that are real release valves where people can actually go and use them, right? That's what we're missing in all these other areas. And by my count, that has been done, right? That's both on our side of the road and Riverton, working across the aisle with Mayor Staggs and the Riverton Council. They've agreed to a lot of these things as well, consolidating the space so we have a bigger space to actually use. The trail along the canal, they've agreed to put houses with driveways fronting that trail, correct? So it's not just somebody's back wall in this isolated area where bad things can happen, where we have to send these guys out to calls. It's open space that people actually see and can use and feel safe. So there's a lot of those elements that were put into it that enhance this area that can help, actually, I think, with the pressure coming from the adjacent areas. The roads, the slip road, I've said, I think is ingenious. I really do. And it does come at a great cost, which means density, and you can correct me again, Steve, if I'm wrong, but when it comes to development, every unit represents a portion of profit, right? Well, every amenity or road, et cetera, represents cost. That's an additional cost that we can't require, right? It's not in our ordinances, it's not in anything. And that's not something we even asked for. It's something they brought to the table, seeing the need for that will help take the traffic from those. If you look at those neighborhoods, it would take those people off of that road and let the others pass through. That makes sense. So I have to give them full credit. After a year, they've really, and a lot of this stuff they brought right up front, but they've really worked through a lot of these things. We have a stormwater issue that can be taken care of, working jointly with Riverton. 134th, that could be viewed as something that helps us get commercial in lieu of. I'm just so hesitant to give away any frontage. Once it's gone, it's gone. And if we don't give ourselves the opportunity, we'll never have the opportunity. We were talking about a few things that popped up. Looking at my head, there's not in here. A few things that popped up, but where do they want to be? Along a freeway, right? The Arts Council piece, I'm not, personally, I have to say, I'm not sure about that. The open space to me needs to be open space for the reasons I mentioned, right? Doing that same, to me, putting an Arts Council building in that location would be doing the same thing that we did with the community college. It just takes that open space away that is needed to release that pressure, especially with those higher density homes along that area. We could, I mean, if that becomes viable, if they get private funding and want to put it somewhere, we have lots of places that we could choose to do that ourselves.
Non-viable commercial
Yeah,
uses.
exactly. Or places that maybe are more conducive to that activity and complement other activities, locations, et cetera. I mean, I look at Town Center. Again, something was done before I think any of us here, in my opinion, could have been done differently. But the commercial pads around it would benefit from something bringing people in on a regular basis. It's such those other things to consider there. The commercial, to me, that's I think this plan has evolved to where it needs to be. They've worked well with the neighbors, come up with just about every solution to every problem that has come up. The only sticking point for me is that commercial piece. Give us the chance. I hope I answered everybody's questions. Fortunately, there weren't too many. That's all I have for tonight.
I'd just like to add, just if I may, Sherry, because I'm going to let you roll here. There are 2 points that are complications in our deliberations. One is that a plan, a general plan, or even a zoning of commercial doesn't mean that we get commercial there. And we have heard from the developer, from the landowner, they are not supportive of putting commercial there. And so the 14 acres is kind of a compromise idea, and there's some, it's a complex solution to a difference of opinions there. One of the things that has been, I'm not going to say a threat because I don't think that's appropriate how it's been discussed. I think that there has been a clarification of the intentions of the landowner, that if it remained commercially general planned, they would instead build churches and or a school on that location, which would essentially eliminate our ability to make it commercial as well. So to Councilman Henderson's
But I think that
point,
was more in the context of if we just denied this,
Right,
because
right.
that was,
It-
we could
very
just say no
clearly.
to this and it remains commercial, low density, residential, and a small piece of.
Right, and that's what I wanted to speak to your point is, you are asking for and proposing an opportunity option, right? Not an absolute one way or the other. And so I want to acknowledge the fact that that proposal from the Planning Commission that you're talking about is a potential compromise solution. And I'm not, again, without saying a support one way or the other at this point, because I want to go through this discussion, but that's part of the reason why there's complexities here, right? There's a landowner has one idea, there's a city with another idea, there's a plan that says one thing, there's, overlapping development rights that may be in conflict. I mean, this is not a simple answer or a simple solution. So that's one thing I want to make sure of is, we have 1,000 acres general planned commercial. That doesn't mean we're getting 1,000 acres of commercial. And so even at 700.
Businesses have to want to be there, so just
Yeah.
clarify that point. Like,
Right.
we don't get to raise our hand and say it's our turn for a Target or a Trader Joe's or whatever it is I get an email for every other day. Hey, we want one of these. That's not up to us. This isn't communism. Like, they have to want to be here.
The Great Wolf Lodge, that was one that came across, yeah. Everybody wants something here. And then the second thing is, and I want to bring this up because, not as a challenge, but I want to make sure that we're clear, is there's this comment about how this study has suggested that we needed all frontage road preserved commercial. And I can't find any phraseology in the study that represents that. And so if there are additional supplemental information or commentary that came from the person who made the presentation or something that supports that assertion, I'd really like it to be a part of our conversation, because the study itself isn't clearly stating that. It doesn't even reference this property in all the areas that it highlights and comments. And so, again, that's not necessarily mean that that's the end-all be-all answer to everything, that means that this shouldn't be considered or anything like that. But if that's going to be a part of our deliberation, I want to make sure that we're vetting all of these comments out and not making anecdotal assertions, if that makes sense. Because I think it's important for our constituents to know that we're doing the diligence, we're going through the work. So that's all I said. I think everything you said was very well said. Jared, I thank you for your comments, so.
Everybody good for tonight?
Yep.
Motion?
I'd actually like to make a comment.
Go ahead.
All right. So a couple of things on this. In regards to the commercial being frontage roads, just in conjunction with Steve's request for clarification on the study, I'd like, as we're looking at that, I'd like to see what the definition of frontage road necessarily is, because this is set back quite a distance from Mountain View Corridor. So I think it would be helpful for, if we're looking and deliberating that, to have an idea of what that frontage actually, what they intended in that study when they're referring to frontage along Mountain View Corridor. All in all, I think that I'm in agreement with different things that have been said in different places, but I think we are to a point that as a body, we need to start looking at making a decision one way or another on this item. Whether that decision is approval or denial, obviously that doesn't need to be today, because we did get new information today, and I am supportive of waiting. But I am to the point where I'm ready to start seriously making that decision and making that clear. I want to make it clear to the public that it's my intent that when this does come up next time, as long as there aren't any major changes, even if there are some small changes, that I would be in favor of making a decision and moving on with other business in the city. So I just wanted to put that on the record, that I'm looking to move this project in a direction. I don't know what that direction is yet, but it's been before us for quite some time, and I think we need to take action one way or another. And with that, I'll turn the time back over to the body that's present.
Can we just say 9.1, can we just list them all in
Yeah,
one motion?
Jackie, can we make a single motion and include all the items? Okay, I will go ahead and make a motion that we continue items 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, 9.6, and 9.7 to a future meeting.
Second.
Motion and second, David?
Yes.
Before I forget that he's there again. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Oh, yes. All right, moving on. Future meetings, March 19th, Planning Commission meeting, 7 p.m. March 25th is the next City Council meeting where we'll likely talk about this again. Events coming up, March 12th, Herriman City Cert Course at City Hall, 6:30, March 13th to 18th, Newsies, Summer Show auditions. Motion to do whatever we need to do now.
I'll make a motion to adjourn our regular city council meeting, reconvene in a work meeting.
Second.
Oh, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everybody.